look to LSO. We're coming back from our lunch break and tour of the Wyoming State Museum. Are we live on YouTube? Okay, welcome back, everyone. Thank you for a good lunch. So we're going to pick up where we left off. We were visiting about the state trails program and taking testimony. Are there any other questions for Director Westby at this time? Seeing none, I do have one question, Director Westby. So I think there's been some questions about whether or not this needs standalone legislation. And I guess I am kind of curious to know if you see that as a bill that would be somehow embedded in the green books, or if that's something that is done through a session law or some kind of amendment to our budget bill. Do you have a thought on what would be the next step if the committee wanted to advance that discussion?
Chairwoman Ellis, thank you for the question. I think it is in need of a statute because hopefully we will have this building for many, many years. And I need to make sure that the revenue is coming in from the building and staying with the program. And if somewhere down the line they choose to sell it, that the revenues go back to the program in which bought it. So I think it does require a statute itself in our agency's 36.
Okay, Representative Newsom.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. So Director Westby, do you see this piece of legislation addressing this building specifically, or addressing that the state parks can own buildings outside of state parks generally?
Director Westby.
Thank you, Chairwoman Ellis. Representative, it just for this piece of facility, this property, I could see that going down a rabbit hole that I don't necessarily want to be a part of at this point. I think it's worth the effort of coming to this body and the legislature to get that authorization to do so.
Okay, any other questions from the committee? Maybe one last one. As far as timing goes, as I mentioned, our next meeting will be in Lander or Riverton in August. And Chairwoman Flitner and I need to sort through how that agenda is going to look. Does it make sense to hold off on a motion directing staff to draft legislation? Or I'm just trying to think of timing wise and things that might affect your discussions with the seller if they're aware, for example, that at this meeting we directed LSO to start drafting legislation, if that provides some assurance to the seller that we are serious at looking at this. Is that, I just want to make sure I understand and think through what we're doing in this moment about next steps.
Madam Chairwoman, I think it's prudent for her to ensure that we're moving in a forward path towards purchase of it for sure. She's been very gracious with us in our bureaucratic process, and to date, I'm worried that could wean very fast. And so anything we could do to give her some reassurance that we are moving in a positive direction, I think would be a good thing.
Okay, Senator Salazar.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I've had a number of people who are in Riverton watching right now and have been watching us. And the comments that I'm getting over the lunch hour was, have you been looking at any structures in Riverton? Because the claim is by a number of people that in fact puts you closer to a number of things as well. So I just wanted to throw that out. Thanks.
Director Westby.
Chairwoman Ellis, Senator, with the due diligence, and I think Deputy Director Glenn has put due diligence, a copy of each on either side. Representative Hunt has a copy of it, and we can pass that through. That due diligence kind of went through a little bit of potential land purchase, not only in Lander, but in Riverton as well, and possibly potential at that point, 3 or 4 years ago, what construction would cost. We all know right now, construction would cost potentially double what it is right now, or what it was 5 years ago, 3 years ago. So there has been due diligence of not only looking at virgin land, but also potentially other state-owned properties in which we could retrofit. And to date, through the due diligence, nothing would work. The Life Resource Center was one that I think in Lander Riverton area, I can't remember which, that they looked at pretty heavily because it has some acreage. However, the amount of vehicles that we have coming in, the loudness of the vehicles that we have coming in is not conducive to the hospital setting that they were talking about there. But so the due diligence did go through a significant evaluation of numerous options and ideas, yes.
Okay, further questions from the committee? Okay, seeing none, I think we'll close that. Oh, excuse me, Representative Jennings.
Thank you, Madam Chair Lady. So I do have one more question, and sorry about this, Director. So do you have a concern that even though there wasn't prohibition against state trails department having off-site properties, but just the general feel of government becoming landlords to make money, just from that standpoint that we're infringing maybe on private sector? Any concerns that you'd feel about that sort of thing?
Director Westby.
Chairwoman Ellis, Representative, it's a great question. I've been in state government now for well over 20 years, and I can almost tell you every year that I've been in state government, somebody in this body, as well as in the executive branch, has asked me to start looking to behave more like a business. And not to say that I want to become and own everything and rent everything to make a significant profit. But in the same turn, we're in a financial crisis now. I've been asked to cut $3.3 million out of my budget. I've been asked to not only put forward the existing amount of services that I've been performing, but do more and maintain those levels of services so I can continue to be mission successful. And so this is a way for my agency, for the Trails program, to do just that. Our charge is to build trail, maintain trail, build as much as we can and maintain as much as we can so we can improve the revenues for the state of Wyoming. This is exactly an avenue for us in which to accomplish that. I do understand your question, and I do feel for that same comment that I think Director Bach said earlier. When we're faced with an expense and revenue concern, their charge is to decrease how many places that they're paying for rent, knowing that inevitably we're taking money out of the private sector hands, but we are also saving the general fund dollars that we've been tasked to reduce. And so it's in a catch-22 for sure, but I hope you can appreciate me taking what you all have said to me in the past and currently, try to be as frugal as I can and think outside the box as much as I can and try to help myself as much as I can. I think one of the funding mechanisms or one of the topics that's coming up is funding and trying to increase revenue for the agency. This is right in line with that.
Co-Chairwoman Flitner.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. So Darren, then if we're talking, or Director Westby, if we're talking about frugality, the building is necessary because of the State Trails program. So can you speak to us about that program and how it came about? I mean, if you can do that briefly, because I guess the opposite side of that coin would be, well, then do away with the building, do away with the program if you're trying to save state dollars.
Director Westby.
Chairman Ellis, Co-Chairman Flitner. It's a great question. For us, the reason that the State Trails program started was a tourism-centric product, is trying to elevate the product that we have, that people were not necessarily organized, not necessarily working in a favor, that actually we got to generate some revenue, not only on a tax side, but on an agency-wide. And so, yes, if we choose not to go forward and we have to go backwards on the building and we have to spend more money on building a building or renting another building, that's less money that goes to the ground on maintaining what we have or growing our trails that we groom every year. And that will dramatically hit the tourism budget, the tourism revenue. I shouldn't say the budget for tourism, but looking at the economic impact for the trails themselves, the motorized trails, snowmobile and ORV, the impact is going to be very close to $1 billion. The impact of the trails is just amazing for what we bring into the state and what that product brings into the state. Looking at how much general fund goes into that program versus how much other funds come in and actually support the program, is minuscule on the general fund side. And so what we try to do is augment fees to make sure that that program's operating properly. And those come off of the registration fees. That comes from a user. Like I said a little bit earlier, the users themselves have said that they find that this is a good use of their fees, so they could then see more money go to ground instead of going to rent.
Follow-up or additional questions, Senator Guru?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Director Westby, I wanted to, Representative makes a good point, and I want to just kind of drill down on that just for a second, because I thought in the testimony I heard, correct me if I'm wrong, the fees that you collect and have collected and are holding right now would in large part pay for this purchase, this building. Isn't that not correct?
Madam Chairwoman, Senator, yes, 100%.
I can follow up as a person that buys those little stickers to put on snowmobiles. You probably get a lot of comments like I get about making sure that every dollar that you collect from those fees goes towards trail maintenance and the trail program itself. They don't want it going to the general fund. They don't want it going anywhere else. Is that also true?
Director?
Madam Chairwoman, Senator, yes, that's correct.
One last question now. If those things are true, and as we heard in testimony earlier today from Director Baca and I, when she talked about leasing buildings, and she looked at me and she smirked because I'm the one that gives her a really hard time about her leases and the cost. And they've gone top to bottom to try to get rid of some of the more egregious, overexpensive leases that we seem to get into. That actually buying this piece of property over a 30-year thing is acting more in a prudent business manner. Wouldn't you agree?
Director?
Madam Chairwoman, Senator, absolutely. Part of the analysis that we had to go through with state building department is with any building that they purchase, you have to go through this algorithm spreadsheet to kind of piece together how much the building costs, how much the maintenance reserve should be, how much the capital reserve should be, how much you should be putting in front for janitorial services, lawn services, all that stuff goes into the spreadsheet, and it calculates out what your return on investment would be. And on this building, it was 14.5 years, where the cost of the building plus all the revenues that are coming in would line up to be 14.5 years. Luckily, these people were forward thinking enough to start saving a little bit of those fee monies over the last, I want to say 4 or 5 years, to where they could have that money in there. Now, to go to your question about should it be going to the ground, should that money been going to the ground, they saw the savings of this dollar to go towards the purchase of this building for the long-term viability of the program was a monumental benefit. So they saved over the last, I'll just say 4 years, enough money to cash flow the purchase of this building. So we can start realizing the $150,000, $175,000 a year benefit back to the program, plus any of the lease amounts that are coming in that will start building the amount of trails that we can maintain and build. So over the course of 40 years, I think the analysis said that we will have saved and put $4 million back to the ground than we would have if we continue down this path of leasing the space.
Any other questions? Representative Jennings?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Just one brief one. So I appreciate all the due diligence and stuff. I just have one, and I'm sure that you've already gone through this. So Lander being a small town, what's the impact to the town? Because you're going to remove this building from the tax rolls. So what would the private sector have paid in that? I'm sure that you already looked at that.
Director Westby?
Madam Chairwoman, Representative Jennings, it might be in the due diligence, and I don't have that exact amount right off the top of my head, but I can surely get back to you on what the county is going to lose in tax revenue based off that building.
Further questions for the director? Okay, with that, we'll close this portion of your testimony. Thank you, gentlemen, for being with us. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to speak on this topic? Is there anyone online that would like to speak on this topic?
Madam Chair, there's no one online.
Okay, so seeing no one wanting to participate during public comment is closed. Committee, what's your pleasure? Senator Landon.
Madam Chairman, thank you. I appreciate the discussion. I think A lot of good points made. As I think about process, I really believe that that we ought to consider a vehicle, which would be a bill, which would give us the mechanism to go forward and represent what we talked about today. We do that in the next meeting, and whether or not we choose to adopt the bill, we can have that debate at that time. But I guess my motion would be that we draft that bill, taking into account Director Bach and Director Westby's work on those 5 points that they shared, including those provisions in the bill, so that we can move on and present this idea. I really, Madam Chairman, I commend the department for thinking outside the box. I mean, I try to be sensitive to competing against private business and all of those issues we've discussed, but I tip my hat to you, Director, for coming to the table with an option in these tight times. So that's my motion, Madam Chairman.
Second that.
Okay, you've heard the motion. Is there further discussion on that motion? Senator Grew?
There we go. We're still talking about just this building. We're not talking about any more blanket resolution, just talking about this building.
Senator Landon?
Madam Chair, yes, to be specific, I think that this particular bill needs to drill down specific to this site because we're also talking about the capability of that agency to secure the funding through the fees, et cetera, that we've talked about. So that's specific to this building, and we would want to make sure we draft it accordingly.
And along those lines, maybe as a just clarifying point, we could probably add some language in there that says, should the agency want to have this authority in the future for another property, they need to seek legislative approval or something that really makes it clear that this is a case by case and they need to get our permission. And then, I would ask Representative Jennings, since you raised the question, I had the same question myself of what impact would this have to the Fremont County tax rolls? If you would take it upon yourself to make sure we get that information, and feel free to reach out to Fremont County commissioners, treasurer's office, what have you, if they have any heartburn over the impact that might have in their county, that would be helpful for us to know as well. So if I could task you with that, that'd be awesome. Okay, so you heard the motion, assuming again that we proceed with this. Senator Grew.
Thanks. And that was my point in asking that question too, because whether it's this piece of property or any piece of property, whether it's the community colleges or anyone else, the legislature wants to have those approvals. I know I didn't speak for the Appropriations Committee very often, but I could tell you, I know them well enough to know that they would be, they would want to make sure that this was a case by case basis. And that's what they would be looking at too. So,
okay, Senator
for those
Landon.
reasons.
Really appreciate the comments from both my Senate friends. I think a provision in this bill which states that the department shall report back to this committee and report to the Appropriations Committee, which they would do anyway on a yearly basis. But we may want to put that provision in this bill, Madam Chairman. So thank you.
Okay, committee members, you feel like you understand the motion well enough with the directives that have been discussed. Senator Salazar.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess the only comment I would have, since it's happening, this is occurring in my county, and I have a number of constituents watching right now, is I reserve the right to make comments once that bill comes back. And I receive, I'm sure I'll receive a great deal of feedback between now and then. I will at that time then make a decision. So I just want to make that comment to my constituents watching. Thanks.
Okay, so you've heard the motion. Any other comments, Representative Sweeney?
I'm good with as second on all of the additions. I would like to make one comment. How many employees do we employ that most likely live in Lander?
Director.
Thank you, Chairwoman, Representative. 16 seasonals and 10 full-time people work out of that building.
Thank you.
Okay, so you've heard the motion, and that the directive would be to ask staff to start drafting legislation for us to consider at our next meeting. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. All those opposed, say no. Okay, the motion is passed, so we'll have LSO draft a bill for our consideration at our next meeting. Before we leave this topic, committee members, we will be in Fremont County for our next meeting. Can you just, with a show of hands, give me an indication of whether, or my co-chair and I, whether or not you'd be interested in looking at this building, or just kind of getting a feel for where it's located, what it looks like? Would that be something you're interested in? Please raise your hands if that's something you'd like to do. Okay, so we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. Okay, so we'll work on the schedule, and if we can make that work, we will. So thank you, Director. We appreciate it. Moving on to our next topic, we did have State Museum expansion. We took a tour of the facility. We looked at, for the benefit of members of the public, we looked at just kind of what's in the archives collection, an art storage space, and some of the other storage spaces within the museum itself. We learned about a storage facility that's located offsite that doesn't necessarily have all the humidity and temperature controls. And so, Director, before we leave that topic, I just wanted to offer you the opportunity to make any comments, or what are you asking us as a committee to maybe think about or take action on at this meeting? And maybe it's nothing, but I just want to make sure I understand what you're interested in.
Thank you, Chairwoman Ellis. I appreciate it. And first, I just want to thank you all for taking the time to not only break bread in the State Museum, but also take the time to tour the facility. It really means a lot to me. It really means a lot to staff. And hopefully you got a little bit of peek behind the curtain to see what they do and why they do it and why it's so important. It makes my heart really sing to know that you guys took the time to do that. And I know it meant a lot to staff. So thank you for that. And I think Sarah touched on a little bit in the meeting, but in 2020, 2021, we were working on a level 1, level 2 study to evaluate the facility and see what it would take to expand the facility in its current location. This year, we're going back at it again to see if we can get some level 1, level 2 study through the capital construction bill. This time we might expand it a little bit just to do a bigger feasibility to see if maybe another facility might not be the appropriate venue for the State Museum, rather than continuing to try to shoehorn it into an office building. Maybe another separate building might be a viable option. And so I guess more of a notification to you that you're probably going to see in the capital construction bill, or at least in the budget, a level 1, level 2 study for the State Museum facility. So
At this time, do you need us to take any action?
Madam Chairwoman, I don't believe there's any action to be taken other than just knowledge and understanding of where we're at and what we're attempting to do.
Okay, questions from committee members? Director, do you have just along the lines of the heads up, just kind of an outline or an estimate of what that number might look like in the CapCon bill or the budget bill?
Chairwoman Ellis, it's going to be anywhere from 250,000 to 400,000. It really depends on whether we're going to expand the feasibility to level 2 into a actual draft design of a new building, or if we're just going to take the second floor and expand into it. So it's going to range depending upon which way the level 1 feasibility study goes into, depending upon what the study says. So it may just be a level 1, and we're working with Capital Construction Department to see what we need to put in there for that. And I know, if you recall, the governor took all the level 1 and level 2s off the capital construction list and bundled them all together. So we didn't have line item. State Museum was 250,000, level 2 was somebody else, was something else. He bundled it all together and put a dollar figure. We were on that list. We're still on that list. However, that bundled amount was reduced to a level that I think, from a priority of all the other level 1, level 2s, I'm not 100% confident that we're going to make that priority level funding cut, or funding level. So I know I've danced around that question, but it could be anywhere from 200 to 400. Probably.
Any other questions from committee members? Senator Grew?
Just one comment. When this committee gets, if it's all right, Madam Chair, when this committee gets constituted about the capital planning, make sure that you just kind of give them a heads up too, because I know some of the people that are members that have some ideas, and we discuss that kind of offline, so.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. So, Director, I did have a thought related to our tour over the lunch break. Maybe we could give some thought to what kind of help we would be able to advocate for with respect to copyright. And I'd be willing to expand that to any assistance that we could give to the Office of Tourism as well. I know that sometimes that just takes man or woman power to gin up some of this effort that it takes to chase down copyright. So, Madam Chairman, I guess I'd like to hear more about that. I mean, if that's something that might inure to the benefit of either one of those agencies, maybe we could shoot for a grant of some kind that would enable that effort to move forward. And but I'd love to hear back from you on that.
Director?
Madam Chairman, Senator Landon, I'd love to get the team together and try to come up with some solutions and bring it back to you as thoughts and potential solutions.
Okay, any other questions? Director, just one other question that I have is, as you're having these conversations about level 1, level 2, is there a way for members of this committee who want to be a little more involved in that to reach out to you and be, kind of have a seat at the table, maybe not as a voting member or anything of that sort, but just provide expertise? And along those lines, if anyone in the public is listening that wants to be involved in museum planning and making Cheyenne and our state museum a better place, how would you recommend those interested persons get in touch with your agency?
Chairwoman Ellis, I thank you for the question. I would say that I would reach out to Kevin Ramler, the State Museum Director. If the funding comes available for the level 1, level 2, he will probably be more than likely be the person leading the charge and would more than willing to accept all thoughts. We're definitely a committee-driven agency. We love to have more heads to the table to come up with the best solutions. So,
Okay.
Kevin Ramler.
Perfect. All right, public, you heard that. Kevin Ramler. With that, we'll close the topic of the State Museum. Keep us in the loop of how things go. And, certainly down the road, we can talk about whether or not this committee would be willing to write a letter of support to appropriators, anything of that sort. Just kind of put that in your back pocket as of something we can talk about in the future. So the next, we're moving on still on state parks. What we have next on our agenda is preference for booking campsites and understanding the barriers of the Land and Water Conservation Fund. And I want to thank LSO and John Brody for putting together some information for us that was in your notebook. So I think, John, do you want to present your memo, or how would you like to kind of go over just the information that you had?
Excuse me. I would defer to the chairwoman if you would like me to go over the memo itself. It's only 4 pages, but I'm more than happy to do that. I'll do what you would like.
John, how about we have you, we'll get these guys off the hot seat for a little bit. And how about we just have you come present to us, and that way we make sure that we understand the Land and Water Conservation Fund and those particular barriers that you highlighted in your memo.
Madam Chairwoman, John Brody, LSO. As part of your materials that were mailed out to you or emailed out to you, depending on how you receive those, you did receive about a 4-page memo that I put together to just provide a basic overview of the Land and Water Conservation Fund. I'll try not to be too brief, but I think the memo itself provides the kind of pertinent information. So the Land and Water Trust Fund is the result of the Land and Water Trust Fund Act. This came about in 1965. The idea for this bill, for this fund, really was to enhance recreation opportunities in the country for the purpose of strengthening the health of Americans, essentially. So to provide more opportunities for people to get outside, to do healthy activities, and to take advantage of the outdoor spaces that our country has. It was originally funded through 3 sources. It was going to be the sales of federal properties, motorboat fuel taxes, and then rec use fees on federal lands. The fund went forward for a handful of years with those funding sources, and it proved just entirely inadequate. So Congress revisited the issue and added the Outer Continental Shelf mineral leasing receipts to the program. That is the main source of funding for the program today. Under the act, the fund is allowed to accrue up to $900 million annually. And it's not a mandatory expenditure, so all of the money that is in the trust fund is subject to appropriation by Congress. There is, I guess there's a caveat, there is some mandatory minor spending that is required, but by and large, that's just a very, very small part of the fund itself. So since 1965, the fund has accrued about $40.9 billion. Because the fund has to be appropriated, less than half of the money in the fund has been appropriated since that time. There are essentially 2 branches of how funds will flow out of the account. One is going to be, I'll just call it the state side as I do in the memo, and the other is going to be the federal side. So on the federal side, basically what they're doing is they're taking this money and the federal government is going to buy land or interest in land and water for the purposes of recreation opportunities. I think that the part that's more of interest to Wyoming and perhaps this committee is going to be the state side. And what the state side is essentially a grant program. That grant program has 2 components. There's a traditional grant program, which is essentially just a formula grant that goes to all the states and territories. Everybody gets a share. And then there's a competitive grant program as well. Now, similarly to how it's used on the federal side, on the state side, it's also for only recreation opportunities. So it's going to be for the planning of recreation opportunities programs, for the development of those opportunities, for the acquisition of recreation opportunities, and then for the enhancement of opportunities. So I think state parks is the state designee. Every state has to have a designee of who administers the LWCF in each area. And state parks is obviously the one for Wyoming and would be able to speak, I think, a lot more intelligently on how this operates on the ground. What I can say is through the bill, states have to set up a designee, as we did with state parks. As it mentions in the memo, there's essentially a planning document that we have to create that kind of outlines our strategy and our vision for what recreation opportunities are going to be coming into the state, what we feel the future will hold. That list, as part of that, there needs to be prioritization of the opportunities that we see so that we can say that, you know, opportunity A has a lot more upside than opportunity B, so therefore it's in, you know, first in line, so to speak. Now, there are requirements and some restrictions for taking part in this program. I'll speak to the restrictions, and they're more auditing requirements. There's going to be sort of site visits that you have to make yourself available to. This program is predominantly administered by the National Park Service. So any site in Wyoming that is using LWCF dollars, as I understand the program, is going to be subject to site visits by the National Park Service. Books are going to have to be open so the Park Service can see that the money being sent to the state is being used for the purpose for which it was provided. I mentioned that it's a grant program, so under the LWCF Act, only up to 50% will be federal funds. So the other 50% has to either be state funds or funds generated from another source. Separate from sort of the auditing requirements and the record keeping requirements, there are restrictions on what you may do with your site if it is a site that receives LWCF funds. And I think specific to the topic that is before the committee is whether or not you can give preference to citizens when it comes to booking campsites. And as you read the act, it's pretty straightforward in the sense that the answer is you cannot. There is some flexibility for the state to allow for a differentiation in fees where you can provide about 50% less fees or a smaller fee to state residents as to out-of-state residents. But when it comes to discrimination to out-of-state residents, the act is fairly clear that you just simply cannot do that. If you do, you're subject to numerous penalties. I mean, the main thing being that your state is probably on the line for returning all of the federal funds that you received through the LCWF program. And then there is a more broad federal provision, I think, that could subject the state to liability for other federal funds that it may receive, depending on how angry federal government gets at the state or whatever state may have violated the terms of that LCWF program. So that is a real high level kind of overview, but happy to go into more detail if you'd like. I will say two things. If you look in the memo, if you use the PDF, I have hyperlinked all of the sources through that document. The one of note I would recommend if you want to get further detailed information is that CRS report from 2019. That was a really helpful resource in putting together this memo. I would also recommend the funding manual, which I reference in the document. And then there's also a LWCF, I believe it's called the LWCF Council. And if you go onto their website, they have a pretty cool interactive map where you can pull up all of the LCWF programs in the country and understand kind of how just popular and widespread this program is throughout the United States. But with that, I would answer any questions that I'm able.
Okay. Questions for Mr. Brody? Co-Chair Flitner?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Mr. Brody, just in your research, did the federal government ever sell off any federal land as their original, one of their 3 funding sources? In your research, did you ever discover that they sold anything?
Mr. Brody?
Great question, Madam Chairman. I did not find specific examples of a particular piece of federal property being sold. However, because the funding for the program was so limited, I wouldn't be surprised that they were certainly taking advantage of that ability. I'm sure they relied more on the motorboat fuel tax and the fees for recreational use, but I'm sure, and I could find an example probably if you'd like.
One other question
Follow up?
too. Thank you, Madam Chairman. How much money has the state of Wyoming received since 1966, 65?
Mr. Brody, do you know that?
Not off the top of my head. I can get that information, or perhaps State Parks will be able to have that more readily for the committee.
Okay. Any other questions for Mr. Brody? Representative Winter?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chairman. Mr. Brody, is there anything in your research that indicates that the federal government requires a reservation system in this whole effort to make it, if you will, fair for everybody?
Mr. Brody?
Madam Chairman, so I guess I would direct you to page 3 and then on to page 4 of the memo. That's really going to talk about, or excuse me, page 3. That's going to really talk about the restriction on discrimination as far as residency. And so that is from the bill, that is from the administrative regulations, and there isn't any specific language on reservation systems themselves. However, the basic takeaway is that if you offer it to, a man from Du Bois, you have to offer it to a woman from Colorado. I'll leave it at that.
Follow up, Representative Winter?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chairman. I guess this question would probably go more to Director Westby, but this reservation system seems to me could be a problem for the locals in the state. a lot of folks want to go some afternoon and get a reservation at their local state park. And I've had a lot of people question me about this, thinking that there ought to be a certain percentage of sites anyway that wouldn't need to be reserved online, but could be reserved in person. And I understood also that there's about 17% of these sites were going to be reserved for that at one time, but from what I understand, that's not been done. And so I may have misunderstood things, but I think that there should be some consideration here for the locals close to these state parks instead of having to do a reservation process.
Mr. Brody, that probably is a better question for Mr. Westby, but feel free to respond if you'd like, but I think that's probably down the road.
Madam Chairman, the only thing maybe that I would add is that this prescription on anti-discrimination when it comes to residency, it only is going to apply to those sites that have accepted LC or LWCF funds. So I don't see a clear prohibition if we have a site in Wyoming that doesn't accept these funds or is funded in a different way from it having a different mechanism for making reservations at campsites, for example. But state parks would certainly be in a better position to speak about on the ground sort of policies and approaches.
Okay. Additional questions for Mr. Brody? Senator Guru.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. So, Mr. Brody, so I'm looking at these charts on page 3 and page 4. So the other states that have these different prices, are they just not taking the funds, or are they just playing the game as far as to see how mad the government gets about it, or what? What's the deal?
Mr. Brody.
Madam Chairman, I guess first could I ask what charts you're in reference to?
Well, if I can, Madam Chairman.
Or just to clarify, I think is it Carla's memo?
That's Mr. Brody's memo.
Carla Smith's. She's got resident
I have a Carla
and non-resident.
I'm sorry.
Charts.
I apologize. I'm looking at Carla Smith's.
Yeah. Carla, if you want to join John, explain your chart. Maybe this is an efficient way to get through that as well.
Madam Chairman, if I can, I would, a little bit on a limb, but I would argue that if you're seeing huge discrepancies between resident and non-resident fees at certain sites on that memo, I would argue that it's probably because those sites aren't LWCF sites. If you're seeing more of a 50-50 split where it's only 50% more than what the resident would pay, that's probably an LWCF site. And I'm not sure how regimented the NPS is, the National Park Service is, when it comes to enforcing the anti-discrimination provisions of the LWCF. But I defer to Carla.
Welcome, Carla. Feel free to, if you want to walk us through your memo, that would be great.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I appreciate the opportunity. I believe Mr. Brody is correct in what he's stating as far as the fees and the lands that are receiving those grants. I'll just go real quickly through my memo, if you don't mind then. And I think most of you have found it. And in conjunction with what John found, you'll be able to see, looking at the memo, that it looks like most states have only the option really to give a preference to their residents through the camping fee reduction or discount. As the 7 states that I looked at, only Colorado and Arizona were not differentiating their fees specifically as resident or non-resident. The rest of them did have some sort of differentiation. And when looking at the camping fees, it really is 3 aspects of fees when you're looking at that, because you go into the park, there's the entrance fee or the day use fee. And then, and that is usually per vehicle unless you're going to a certain site. And I hope Director Westby will correct me if I err, but then there is a reservation fee, and that is in almost all these states is just a one-time. When you make the camping reservation, there's a fee attached to that, and some states charge you extra if you do that online. And then there is the actual camping fee, which is for the campsite per night. And so with each of these, you can see from the table 2 and the table 3, how they break out and the states do them differently. Now, there is a differentiation also in providing for an annual pass for the entrance fee. Several states, including Wyoming, have an annual pass. And Wyoming additionally discounts that with an early bird discount of $6 off if you purchase it before February 19th in that year. Then there is no discount for making a reservation, no annual pass for that, but there are discounts allowed for residents and an annual pass for doing the camping permit for a full year. And in Wyoming, the bucking horse pass started in 1971 for $5, and it wasn't differentiated between residents or non-residents. And then in 1992, they said, no, just residents. Only residents can get this bucking horse annual pass. And we're also going to charge an entrance fee of $1 for residents and $2 for non-residents. And so Wyoming still only offers the annual pass or permit, bucking horse permit, to residents. New Mexico is the only other state that offers this annual permit for camping, and they also offer it at a much higher rate for non-residents. And if you look at the blogs and the tourist information coming out of New Mexico, it sounds like that is very much used by a lot of people that go to New Mexico, and they'll camp their 14 days here, then they'll camp their 14 days there, and then they'll camp their 14 days someplace else. So that might be a reason why I wouldn't want to suppose, but that's as to why Wyoming is for residents. Now, if you look at a statute, most of the states, their statutes grant their board or their state park commission the ability to set the fees within a certain limit. And the same is true with Wyoming. And so Wyoming resident fees are below the maximum set in statute, and the non-resident fees are right about at that level for all of the fee categories in Wyoming. Now, Wyoming has something that is brand new this year, and it's in response to address issues and concerns and complaints of the local people about our friends from the South or from other neighboring states or wherever coming and taking all the reservation spots. And so they instituted this Head Start, the state parks did. And so when they open campsites, it's 120 days out. So if I was going to reserve today for something that was going to open, it would be September 20th. And so I would have a full week as a Wyoming resident to go ahead and get my reservations in before it would be opened up to non-residents. So I get 120 days, they get 113. And according to the officials that I spoke with over at state parks, this is being very well utilized by state residents, that they're really appreciating this and going forth and using it. So that should be visible in the records and the reports that they show next year for the split in resident and non-resident. I also want to mention that while you see here trying to do apples to apples as far as residents or non-residents, it's not the exact picture because states also provide certain discounts for different categories of people, like disabled veterans. That's a big category that almost all of these states provide. Colorado has many, many categories of this for like seniors, regular military, certain kinds of disabilities. And then they have like a day pack out of a library discount kind of thing. And then Washington State for families that are in foster care to go to the park. But most of these also have restrictions on what day, first of all, it's not a free pass. It's usually a reduced price pass. And it is only for like the middle of the week kind of thing, or off of holidays or that sort of thing. Whereas in Wyoming, the state offers and honors its disabled veterans by giving them a lifetime camping permit or camping bucking horse permit, so that they can camp anytime, anywhere. They don't have to reapply for it over and over again. So Wyoming is very generous in that regard, but I wanted you to realize that other states do offer certain category of discounts, but for certain categories of residents. And I think that's pretty much all I really had. If there's any questions, Madam Chairwoman.
Okay, thank you, Carla. Senator Schuler.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Just one question on the, I really like the idea of the 7-day Head Start policy. I know you just said you just started it. Has that been, how have we gotten the word out on that? Through the website, or how are our residents finding out about that?
Carla, if you can, maybe that's a Director Westby question as well, but if you know that information, feel free to share.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, Senator Schuler. I found out by looking at the website, and I believe that they have other promotional materials. I'll leave that up to Director Westby to completely answer that.
Thank you.
Any other questions for our LSO staff? Thank you for your work on preparing these memos. I have a question for John. So I'm reading paragraph I on the prohibition on discrimination. It says, with respect to property acquired or developed with the assistance from the fund, discrimination on the basis of residence, including preferential reservation or membership systems, is prohibited. Here's the best part, except to the extent that reasonable differences in admission and other fees may be maintained on the basis of residence. So we talk about that contemplates a difference in fee, but it says reasonable differences in admission. And so that's where I want to know what that means better. And if that's kind of what we're hanging our hat on when it comes to the 7-day Head Start, that's the language that I'd like, if you had doing your research, and I haven't read the CRS report and the other information you provided in your hyperlinks, but when you were doing your research, did you see any discussion of what reasonable differences in admission is as a permitted exception?
Madam Chairman, in looking at all the materials that form the basis of this memo, everything seemed to focus on the differentiation in fees. Even looking at the Code of Federal Regulations with respect to the rulemaking that would be done under the Act, there really wasn't any more fleshing out of what this reasonable difference in admission constitutes. So it could be fairly arbitrary on the part of the National Park Service, the Department of Interior.
Federal lawmaking. Okay, thank you, John. Any other questions for LSO? Thank you so much. With that, we'll have Director Westby come back with his team. And I apologize to the director. If you looked at our agenda, we had a broader topic of agency funding, agency overview and funding options. And I don't know that we should have closed that out. I think I skipped over it. So Director Westby, you're welcome to pick up on the LC, the Land and Water Conservation Fund discussion, and then come back to it. Or if you want to go to that first and then come back to the fund, however you'd like to do that. But I just realized I didn't give you a full opportunity to present ideas if you'd like to. So feel free to touch on any comments or ideas you have.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. We might as well tackle LWCF in the reservations. To go to Representative Winter's question, we do have 19% statewide of our camping fee or camp spots are first come, first serve. They are not on the reservation system. Just wanted to clarify that question. I think we started out the season with 17% and expanded that up to 20 or almost 20% now. So as much as I would love to say that we could eliminate the reservation system, I guarantee you we would have just as many complaints now for taking away the reservation system as we have now of people saying they want, more than 20% off the reservation system. It's a luxury. It's an amenity that people have just become accustomed to. I know when I was growing up, I would hop in the car and drive out to Alcova and pray that I could find a camp spot. about 70% of the chance I got one. 30%, another 20 miles back home and maybe camped on the road or something. But having that reservation system has been a benefit to our consumers, not only the residents, but the non-residents. Our concern with putting the red flag way too high on the Land and Water Conservation Fund is that we're running the risk of potentially losing our funding. We run the risk of not being able to pay some of the grants that we put out there either to ourselves or to our consumers. And so by and I don't like saying discriminating against, but giving the in-state that 1 week head start, we're putting things at risk. And not to say that we're willing to buck the system, but we heard loud and clear from the constituents here in the state of Wyoming that we needed to try to give them something. And so we tested the waters with 7 days, and we'll see if we get our hands slapped. If we get our hands slapped, we might have to pull that or go a different direction. The definition that you read, we read all the time and see how we can interpret it differently or how we can spin those words a little bit better to build our argument. And we're prepared for the argument if it ever comes, and we hope it doesn't, but we're hoping that we can maintain status quo with the 7-day head start, maintain status quo with the offering a camping pass to residents versus non-residents. There's a lot of benefit to be a state of Wyoming resident right now in our system. And I'd hate to lose that because of a definition that we probably can or cannot argue in a court of law, whether we win or not. So, but it would probably end up there if they so choose to go that direction.
Okay. Any other comments from your colleagues?
Madam Chairman, Dave Glenn, Deputy Director of State Parks and Cultural Resources. To answer Representative Flitner's question, from 1965 to 2019, 933 grants, $39,632,000. And I just would also like to just throw out, just so folks are really clear on what LWCF funding is. Some of the projects we're funding this coming year, it's repaving a parking lot for a baseball field in Gillette. The community of Land are looking at expanding their city park, a new park up in Sundance. So while some monies come to the state parks on this, the majority goes out to the local communities with LWCF funding. We'll have about $2.4 million to distribute this year.
Okay. Further questions for Mr. Glenn? Director Westby? So I guess that is my question then. In looking at that language, extent that reasonable differences in admission, is that what you're hanging your hat on in offering that 1 week head start for Wyoming residents?
Madam Chairwoman, yeah, that's exactly it. And it's an interpretation internal, and that's the only thing we have to do that. And it's our personal interpretation. We have not gone to the Attorney General's office to get an opinion or advice on it. We felt that it was an opportune time for us to take the constituent comments and try to give as much as we can without getting too much red flag waving in the face of the federal government that oversees this program. But if it came down into the court, that's where we would hang our hat.
And then Director, along those lines, so we just heard some testimony about how much is going to be repainting a baseball field, parking lot, some other parks that aren't connected to state parks, the big ones that we're talking about, the camping. It's geographically large. What is like the financial liability if, we were to get in trouble for this camping state parks, the campsites? Do we know those numbers?
Madam Chairwoman, we don't know. We've had discussions with the National Park Service and we've asked them the specific question. They said, we're not going to come looking for you. Don't wave your flag. We're not going to come looking for you. Based on what John Brody did with LSO, there is some potential repayment or make us stop. And that's what we've heard is they'll make us stop.
Okay, further questions of Senator Guru?
Director Westby, or for anybody, your panel here. This fee structure, does it have to be uniform system-wide, or do you have the ability to, and it's kind of a two-part question. One, go to more of a dynamic pricing. I mean, there are some of your campsites and some of your parks that are much more used, much more popular, much maybe closer to a greater number of people than others. There's that component to it. Then there's the other component, and that is, and we call it in my business street pricing, where you're pricing your product in comparative relation to what, if there's a private campground across the way, what are they charging? So if they're not, is there a way for you from park to park to differentiate with that? And how are you doing with that? Do you get a lot of blowback from the communities, some of the communities that you're serving, that you're undercutting the local guy, or too much if you're filling up too fast and they're not, or the other way around? Do you feel like you're just about right? How does that all work?
Director Westby?
Madam Chairwoman, Senator, the question's valid. Several years ago, we came to this body to put a cap on our fees and allow us to operate underneath that cap. A couple of years ago, we had a fee increase. It didn't quite reach the caps on any level. This year, we increased the fees. We maximized the non-resident. Most of those non-resident fees, if you saw in Carla's memo, we maxed out on the non-resident fees. The resident fees, we tried to keep, well, we have to keep at least no more than 50% to stay in line. That's very clear in the legislation, that no more than 50% can be charged for that to a non-resident to a resident. And so we're very cognizant to try to maintain that less than 50% difference between resident and non-resident. As per your dynamic pricing, part of that up to cap that we have that gave us the flexibility to do that in certain locations. We have not gone to dynamic per site location there at that point. We still have to go through rulemaking. It's not as dynamic, and I would air quote dynamic just because we have 45 days and then we have to go through our commission, and it's not as dynamic, but it still gives us the flexibility if we choose to, say, decrease our price at Semino to try to drive people to Semino. We have that ability through rules to do that, so long as we stay underneath the legislative cap.
Further questions for Director Westby? Well, how can we be of help? I don't know if requesting some kind of memo to understand babies, explore that reasonable differences in admission is a good idea or a bad idea. I certainly think having a week head start for a small state like Wyoming that gets engulfed by large populated states. I mean, you see it when you go camp, and I don't know how many of my colleagues on this committee camp. I do. There are lots of my friends from the South that come up. It looks like a Colorado reunion weekend. I'll just say it. So I like the 7-day certainly, but would just kind of want to know your thoughts on what we can do to provide some assurances and even some legal rationale onto our thinking, so that, if the Park Service or some federal agency wants to start examining this more, that we have some data talking about our low population compared to our neighboring states, and just providing kind of that rational basis for why we offer that. Do you think that would be helpful, or are you just wanting us to lay low and see how this goes and be quiet, even though I want to shout it from the rooftops? And I'm sad to know that I didn't book my campsites during that grace window. I'm sad that I didn't. But anyway, your thoughts, Director.
Senator, or Madam Chairwoman, thank you. I think we would love to just sit and wait, just to see how this goes. I think our team is prepared in gathering data and gathering our potential debate with them, potential, I'm not going to say battle, but we're being prepared if it goes down a bad path. We want to continue to offer 7 days. We think it's right. We think it's valid. I don't know that going and trying to battle with them at this point is valid. Whereas right now we might be able to just get by with it. And if we're not going to raise any more red flags, we might be able to continue this path. But we're prepared if they come back to slap us around, that we have a way to try to battle it. And we may come back to you for a letter of support if that works. Along those same lines, if we're ready to kind of roll in, this is a great segue back into the funding options and potential growth if that works.
Sure. Any other questions before we leave this? And I would offer, certainly that's a letter I'd be happy to draft and sign if needed. If Wyoming were to receive any pushback on offering that 7-day advance head start on its reservation system, unless anyone has any heartburn about that. I think we should do more, but I know that it's a start. So, okay. Senator Landon.
Thank you. Just for what it's worth, I appreciate your thoughts right there. I think we stand ready, to back up the whole thing. I love your thought of going as low as you can there. Just go low, and we'll be prepared to kind of back you up. I know my constituents pay for everything around those parks. And to me, that's a big factor. It's their tax dollars that are paying for the roads to get there and all the things that we can throw into that basket. So thank you for that.
Co-Chairwoman Flitner.
Madam Chairman, thank you. And Director Westby, do you know if you've ever had a conversation with our congressional delegates about the use of the funds in perpetuity, and maybe just trying to change that language at the federal level so that we wouldn't be so held to those dollars in perpetuity?
Director Westby.
Madam Chairman, Madam Co-Chair, we've talked to them, and I could let Dave talk a little bit. That's anything that comes out of the perpetuity has to go through what's called a success exchange. So if we're going to pull something out that's been funded with LCF, we have to augment it with another piece of property or another venue of like. So that's why the perpetuity. I'm not saying that we necessarily dislike that, because we always want more outdoor recreation facilities. And if you're going to let one disappear, either sell it off, we want to see some more outdoor recreation come online with that, especially if it was funded with land and water. I'm not sure that the perpetuity side of the house would benefit us, because we're hopefully always putting land and water conservation fund money into our system to make it bigger and better. Our biggest concern is what are we doing to the communities that are receiving some of those dollars, and if we lose the access to grant to those people, what is the impact to them? That's kind of significant to us. And I don't know if I addressed your question on that. And maybe Dave, you understood a little bit differently.
Madam Co-Chair, follow up.
No, I'm good. Thank you.
All righty. Any other comments from the committee? Along those lines, I should say thank you for offering that. I know we've talked about this for a long time. I appreciate you offering a 7-day advance head start for Wyomingites. That's great. Okay, so back to the funding issue for the agency. Feel free to dive into that topic, Director Westby.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. And I appreciate the ability to kind of step back with Mr. Castilian presentation. I kind of lost track of my agenda, but I knew I wanted to get the State Trails building while I had A&I here. So thank you for allowing me to bounce back. Kind of dovetail off the last conversation. One way to address Representative Winter's solution of adding more first come, first serve, and adding the Madam Chairwoman, your comments about a lot of green license plates in a campsite is to add more campsites, right? To add more product, to add more ability to have more people come to the state. Again, we are an impact community organization, a tourism centric, outdoor rec centric, and cultural centric agency where we want green license plates. I say this to a lot of people that do voice their concerns to me, that I love green money. Green money spends well in the state of Wyoming. And so albeit I feel everybody's concerns about being overrun with out-of-staters in our campsites, but it's serving my mission really well to be impactful to those communities, because hopefully they're coming into the state and they're dropping money into those communities. And so thank you for that little sidebar. And with this, I would like to introduce Chris Floyd. He's our office outdoor recreation office manager, to kind of just give a quick overview of outdoor recreation in the state of Wyoming and what they've been doing, why they do it, and where they're looking to head. So Chris, introduce yourself and.
All right. Madam Chairwoman, thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you guys today. My name is Chris Floyd, and I've been the manager of the Office of Outdoor Recreation for over a year now, and what a year it's been for outdoor recreation with record-breaking numbers statewide and nationwide. Some of you already know a bit about the Office of Outdoor Rec, but for those of you who do not, I would like to give you a brief overview of who we are and what we do. Our office was created in 2018 as recommended by the Governor's Task Force on Outdoor Recreation, which was convened by Governor Meade as an attempt to push for greater diversification of the state's economy through outdoor recreation. Our office currently has 2 permanent staff, including me, and 1 year-round seasonal employee. The state non-motorized trail program is also under our purview. We're based at State Parks headquarters here in Cheyenne, but we travel the state on a regular basis, meeting with recreation stakeholders, building relationships, and making new connections. Our mission is to work with communities, stakeholders, land managers, and government officials to help grow and diversify the state's economy through responsible outdoor recreation opportunities. Along with the extraction industries and agriculture, the tourism and outdoor recreation sector is one of the 3 pillars of the state's economy, and we believe that it's the one with the most potential for growth. Outdoor recreation currently accounts for 4.2% of the state's GDP, over 22,000 jobs, and it adds $1.6 billion to our economy. While the impact is already significant, we believe that we can do better. For comparison, Colorado has a roughly similar size and geography to Wyoming, yet its outdoor recreation sector adds over $12 billion to their economy each year. For that and many other reasons, we believe that we can double the impact of outdoor recreation in Wyoming by the year 2030. How do we do this? First, we work directly with local communities through organized outdoor recreation collaboratives that we convene and facilitate, sometimes with assistance from the University of Wyoming, to identify areas for recreational growth and improved management. These collaboratives are composed of recreationists, land managers, and government officials representing a broad range of interests, including motorized and non-motorized recreation, as well as hunting, fishing, and conservation. When we communicate with these folks, we don't tell them what they need in terms of outdoor recreation. We ask and we listen. That way, the collaboratives are driven at the local level, at the grassroots level, by local stakeholders. We currently have 4 outdoor rec collaboratives up and running, with 1 new one scheduled to start soon. While these collaboratives are still in their early stages, they've already rallied behind projects that have risen in priority with federal and state land managers. So they're already producing results such as the Via Ferrata climbing route at Sinks Canyon State Park, new trails, and an ice skating rink at Hot Springs State Park. Federal agencies like the BLM and the Forest Service look at the projects that emerge from these collaboratives for guidance in terms of where to put dollars on the ground to support them. These federal agencies know that collaborative projects have been vetted by local communities, and so they're looking for ways to support them, which means more federal dollars being spent in Wyoming and more private businesses and contractors being able to work on projects that communities want. I would add that these collaboratives also have a great potential to develop products and experiences that our partners at the Office of Tourism can help use to promote Wyoming as a destination. The Outdoor Rec Office also works with organized recreation groups that we believe will be, organized recreation groups on projects that we believe will be beneficial to the state. A good example of this is our ongoing strong support for the Southwest Wyoming Off-Road Trails System, or SWAT, a nonprofit stakeholder group that's been working hard for more than a year to establish a motorized trail system linking communities, historic sites, and federal lands in the southwest part of the state. Among state agencies, our office and the State Trails Program have taken the lead on this project because it is a concept that we know will have a major economic impact. OHV riders typically spend $100 a day of travel or more, and every day we keep them in Southwest Wyoming, the more impact they'll have. SWAT has already laid out the core of their trail system in Uintah County using county dirt roads, one highlight of which is the old Lincoln Highway Trail between Evanston and Fort Bridger. So thinking more broadly and stepping back just for a minute, we believe that this trails concept could actually be applied statewide. using SWAT as the model, with the goal of linking Evanston to the Black Hills and Cody to Cheyenne with a 97% dirt trails motorized system. I want you to know that we've been speaking with communities in Southwest Wyoming over the last year, helping SWAT make the case for enrolling many city and county roads in that region in the State Trails Program. We've also helped bring SWAT to the attention of federal and state agencies. For example, as mentioned earlier, WYDOT is now seriously considering using interstate and highway right-of-ways to connect to motorized trails when no other routes are available. Our office played a role in bringing that to WYDOT's attention, and we appreciate Director Luke Reiner's receptivity to that concept. Also, we've been working with the National Park Service and local stakeholders, taking the lead on coordinating a proposal that would allow OHVs with state trails decals to access the visitor center on the main road through Fossil Butte National Monument, which would not only increase visitation there, because it's one of the least visited national park sites, but would also provide a needed boost for nearby communities like Kemmer. If we can help bring SWAT to fruition, it will be a huge economic driver for motels, restaurants, and other businesses in that corner of the state. And I just want to recognize and thank Senator Schuler for help with all this with SWAT, and also recognize Senator Dockstader for his work on it. I would add that we would be more than willing to help develop a detailed presentation with our friends at SWAT for the next WCR meeting if the committee is interested.
Let me just interrupt you. Yes.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Another way we may help grow the outdoor recreation sector in Wyoming is by promoting events that have an immediate impact in our communities. And one of the many examples of this is the Magpul Wyoming Governor Shooting Match presented by Vortex Optics, which is a high-level national three-gun match that will be held at the Stukenhof Range in Casper this year from June 25th to 27th. The match will feature approximately 200 participants, over 90% of whom are from out of state. The economic impact to the Casper area will be significant, bringing in hundreds of thousands of dollars for that one shooting event. We believe that shooting sports events have great potential for growth in Wyoming, and we've been working with local gun ranges to identify needs and priorities should funding come available. Events like the Governor's Match encourage recreationists to travel to Wyoming, spend their dollars here, and then return home satisfied with their experience in our beautiful state. The Outdoor Recreation Office also took the lead on fundraising efforts among 6 local county tourism boards to fund the new Backcountry Discovery Routes Adventure Motorcycle Map, commonly known as the BDR map. Nearly all Western states have a BDR route mapped through their states, but Wyoming has been conspicuously lacking until now. Using existing public dirt roads and trails, the route runs north and south through our beautiful state and will take riders anywhere from 7 to 9 days to complete, and the riders will have to stop regularly for fuel, food, supplies, and lodging. As a result, it's estimated that this map will have an impact of between $1 million and $3 million in direct spending each year. And it's predicted to bring in more than 1,000 riders the first year alone. We're working with BDR to launch the map and the corresponding marketing campaign beginning in January 2022. If you want to learn more about that program, you can go to ridebdr.com, RIDEBDR.com. One other way that we're moving the needle on outdoor recreation is through the recently released Wonder Map, which is our one-stop for all things related to outdoor recreation in Wyoming. This was a great partnership between state parks, the Office of Tourism, Game and Fish, WYDOT, and our federal partners. The map is currently accessible on our website, wyorec.com, WYOREC.com, and through the Office of Tourism's website, and it includes links to opportunities in other state agencies like Game and Fish. The Wonder Map enables residents and visitors to explore all the state has to offer without searching through half a dozen or more websites from all the different federal, state, and local land managers. The map has 15 layers and thousands of data points for all major recreational opportunities across Wyoming. It includes not only things like trails and campgrounds, but also target shooting ranges and horse motels. It is web-based and compatible with all devices using your browser. It's an easy to use product, and you don't have to download an app to use it. I hope you'll try it out and let us know what you think and give us some feedback on how we can keep improving it. The goal of the map is, among other things, to get visitors to realize just how much more there is to do in our state beyond Yellowstone, Grand Teton, Jackson Hole, and Devil's Tower. It's a tool that we can use to disperse tourists and recreationists around the state, particularly to communities that want more tourist dollars. If we can get these visitors to spend one more night, eat a few more cheeseburgers, then the state of Wyoming and our local businesses get a big win. Finally, I would like you to know that under our leadership, 6 state agencies have combined forces to establish an interagency outdoor recreation team with the goal of prioritizing and implementing the 59 recommendations of the Governor's Outdoor Recreation Task Force report. The team consists of high-level managers in state parks, game and fish, state lands and investments, Department of Transportation, Business Council, and the Office of Tourism. Our team meets monthly, and we've made steady progress on the goals that we prioritize for this year and the next 5 years. This collaboration among state agencies is a great example of how we can use the existing resources of state government to adapt to the new opportunities and challenges presented by the growth of outdoor recreation. And one more thing. Let me finish up by acknowledging that we hear from time to time as we work with citizens and leaders across the state that when we say we want to grow outdoor recreation, some people are concerned about that. They don't want the state overrun with green license plates. They don't want crowded trails, and they don't want our precious natural and cultural resources damaged through use and abuse. While I also share these concerns, I learned last year, like we all did, that change is already here, and doing nothing will not prevent it from continuing. Visitors from out of state and around the world are going to keep coming to Wyoming regardless, and they will come in their droves. Even in the most remote places, our beautiful scenery and burgeoning recreation opportunities cannot be kept secret forever. We have to get in front of the growth that is already happening and will only increase by being good stewards of our resources. Yes, we want to grow recreation, but we want to do it the Wyoming way, the right way, by working with our communities and promoting the state's interests when we work with our federal partners. Thank you, Madam Chairwoman.
Thank you, Mr. Floyd. Questions for Mr. Floyd? The one I'll have at the outset, I think you had written remarks prepared and you had a lot of great information. Would you be willing to share your written testimony with our committee? We'll make sure everyone has a copy of that.
Madam Chairwoman, I'll do that.
Thank you. We appreciate it. Senator Schuler.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Just a comment more than anything else. Just wanted to give kudos to Chris. He's been amazing with the Southwest Outdoor Trails folks. I mean, honestly, it wouldn't be where it is without him. He's been a workhorse between him and Mark DeSuero, who's the kind of the head guy. They got us all moving in the right direction. But he has come to meetings. He's done them through Zoom. He's come in person. He's provided so many resources for us. And I just wanted to mention that because he understands, I think, and sees where this could lead in terms of an economic driver for the state of Wyoming. So I just want to give kudos to him. And I appreciate, though, the information that you gave on all the collaboration of the interagency teams. I think that's important, and I think that's going to help us statewide. But thanks for all you've done. Appreciate it.
Okay. Further questions for Mr. Floyd? I think one benefit we have is having, our Senate Chairman of Transportation sitting in both chairs and kind of making sure that all these conversations are being coordinated. So thank you for the update on how WYDOT has been working with your agency to work through some of these right-of-way and access issues. I think, we just had a presentation from Colorado, and it's kind of a thing down in Colorado for the 14ers. If you climb every 14er, that's kind of a badge or something people do down there. And I've always wondered in Wyoming, like, what would be our achievement? And I don't know that it's climbing a certain number of mountains at a certain elevation, or if it's, I traveled on my dirt bike from this point to this point, and I did this, and I climbed this mountain. And so a thought I've always had is, what makes you like true Wyoming outdoor tough, or something along those lines of the true adventurer? What's our thing that gets that outdoor enthusiast saying, okay, this year I'm going to walk the Continental Divide. This year I'm going to ride this dirt bike across Wyoming. This year I'm going to do this, just those kind of things. So keep up the good work, because this is an important industry for our state. Representative Haraldson.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. One thing too, I don't know, maybe a question or a statement. The SWAT concept, I heard about it the first time about a month ago. Love it. Amazing. Needs to happen. It needs to happen more than down there. And so has there been any more conversation being brought forward for other areas in the state that maybe this could be a beneficial aspect to, where we could tie county to county or area to area through some of our off-road trails, logging roads, that type of stuff? Anyways, just kind of maybe speak towards that.
Mr. Floyd?
Madam Chairwoman, Representative Harrelson. Yes, we have been having conversations through our outdoor recreation collaboratives, like in Sweetwater County and in Fremont County and in Park County, with the idea that at some point we would be able to tie these areas together. And some of the challenges we're having is just identifying, the route to take. It could be a little bit complicated, right? With obviously private land ownerships and different land managers along the way, trying to make that happen. But there seems to be a lot of momentum behind it, and word is getting around on its own like wildfire. And everywhere we go, we promote it every chance we get, for sure. And we're looking to Northeast Wyoming for a new outdoor recreation collaborative there. And we know there's a lot of motorized interest there too. And so we're definitely going to make that a priority. But I appreciate Senator Schuler mentioning Mark Tesoro and his team. They do a great job reaching out. I believe they reached out to a lot of folks on this committee about this concept. And we think it's got legs, and we think it will be impactful, more importantly. So yeah, we're doing the best we can to get the word out there.
Madam Chairwoman, if I could add
Director?
to that, and Chris did a great job of explaining it. We're trying to change in a big picture. We're trying to change how Wyoming recreates, how we bring people to the state to recreate. I would love to be able to use some ARPA funding to create 6 off-road play areas throughout the state and then connect them all. And then how do you become, we are the destination for off-road vehicles. And it's done responsibly, and it's done, the way it's supposed to be, and we're not ripping up, we're good stewards of the land. And so the concept that he keeps bringing up in the collaboratives just is so exciting to go sit through. If you haven't been to one and one gets close to your county, sit in on it, because it's exciting to listen to the ideas. Now, the biggest problem is we have all these great ideas, no funding. So these ideas sit here, and then maybe a few private individuals, maybe a county will throw $1 here, $1 there, but we have no real money to move the needle. And so with that, I would like to just take it to the next level, the funding side of the piece, to let you all know that I couldn't be more proud of staff across the entire range. Like I said a little bit earlier, we developed a extensive list to submit to the governor's office for ARPA funding, for infrastructure potential funding, to help us help the outdoor rec collaboratives, the counties that are trying to move the needle in outdoor recreation in their world, to give them those funding dollars to start making movement on this type of new product. Talking with Diane, like I said earlier, and what she said, product development, product development, product development. If we don't like full campsites, let's add more campsites. We did a study. John Ciccarelli is on the list as a potential presenter today, but I'll just give you a highlight of what he was going to present. He did a study of all the campsites in the state of Wyoming, and we know exactly where we're short. Southwest Wyoming is short on campsites. So guess what's in our proposal? We're going to put some money to try to develop some campsites, off-road parks in Southwest Wyoming. That's like a very high priority. It shows it in the data. So if we build it, they will come. And looking at product growth, existing product growth, we know we have 537 campsites at Glendo. We have land to put another couple hundred there to alleviate some of that congestion. Buffalo Bill, we have the potential, we have 99 campsites there. If we double our campsites there and put some electricity, it could be a changer on how people enter from the east entrance into the Yellowstone Park, as opposed to coming down from the north. These are the things that I think, we talk about, yep, I was cut $3.2 million this last go around, but you know what? Let's double down our efforts on one-time funding to improve our product offering that the state has to offer, so we can increase our revenues into the state, whether it be taxes, whether it be fees, whether it be lodging fees, whether it be a weekend fishing fee, whatever it is, we have the economic opportunity to do that. Mr. Castilian talked about, somebody being forward thinking in Trinidad, thinking, all right, our bust is coming. What do we do? Well, outdoor recreation. Well, I can guarantee you our entire state is filled with opportunities for outdoor recreation. And it's a tourism sector that's coming. It's not build it and then they all come to live here. It's how do we get them here have them enjoy themselves through the state and go back home. We're ripe for potential explosion in economic development there. And so with that, I know we're running on short on time, so I'm going to keep rolling on the funding piece. Mr. Castilian talked about GoCo and how they got their funding. Well, they get their funding through lottery. Well, that is an option. License registrations in the past. We've talked about lottery in the past. We've talked about registrations in the past. You heard from LSO staff that Wyoming or Montana has you pay an opt-in registration fee when you license your vehicle, and you don't have to pay an entrance fee when you go into a Montana State Park. We've researched that. We've done analysis back, I don't know, 15 years ago. Not to say that it wouldn't work now, but 15 years ago, it didn't work and it financially wouldn't be a one-to-one, and we would lose money if it went that direction. Trust fund was brought up in the past. Non-motorized trail use fees has been brought up in the past. None of these have grown and gained traction. Some other ideas, we've been working with Office of State Lands and Investment Board on a mountain bike trail user fee on state parks and Osley land to possibly get that non-motorized dollars starting to come into the state. Fuel tax increase, it was on the dockets last year, it didn't pass. That would bring revenue to the agency for more product development. You guys just passed the sports gaming revenue or sports gaming bill. I don't know where that revenue is going, but I'll raise my hand right now. Working with the tribes to put in a casino. I know Senator Driscoll has been talking to us for days on trying to get us off the general fund, and putting a casino in Thermopolis or at Hot Springs State Park could possibly do that. I'm on the fence. I like the idea of revenue, and I like the idea of becoming general fund neutral. But what does that do to the system? I don't know. But that's an idea. I'm just throwing it out there. New lottery games that the guys got creative earlier or late last night, maybe too late last night, about a new scratch off, a state park scratch off game where if you get 3 pit vault toilets, you win, you know. But you know, those are just options of trying to find, you know, some different revenue to do what you were asked to do, and possibly talk about getting us off the general fund. And however we do it, I want to make sure it's sustainable. And right now, I think now is the time in our state, in our situation that we're in. Now is the time to be doubling down on products, organizations that have the ability to truly move the needle on economic impact, revenues for the state of Wyoming. And I proudly and will stand here and beat my chest that we are it. We have the products, both outdoor recreation, culturally, to make communities livable, to make communities inviting. And to go to one of the comments about how do we get people to embrace that outdoor recreation tourism, you know, thing. We have to train them. We have to go out and have that conversation that, all right, would you rather pay $1,000 more in taxes, or do you want these people to pay your taxes for you? Have that conversation. I know it's easy, and that was very blunt and very straightforward, but I know Dave could talk about, was it Fruta or Fruta? Fruta in years past would no sooner want you in their state. This is the right story, right? Not Moab, right? But wouldn't want you in their town until somebody said, hey, you know what? You're going in the negative. You need this tourism dollar. Well, now they are the most inviting people. They want you to come. They want you to spend their money. And look at them now. They're taking over the western side of Colorado. So, and I think Mr. Castilian even talked about that. But so we have the opportunities to really move the needle in the outdoor recreation and tourism industry, and build upon what the cultural side of our agency has for each and every community. And so I don't know where we wanted to go with any potential thought concepts, and that could be next agenda item, but I really appreciate the opportunity to really be excited and show that we're not in the pit. We are here to dig ourselves out, and we're ready to start making that happen. So
Questions for the director on trying to get the agency as off the general fund? Or suggestions? Senator Landon?
Well, Madam Chairman, I want to thank both of our chairs for setting up what I think has been a real informative day. I think we're off to a good start for an interim. Really appreciate your department, Director Westby, and appreciate your ideas too. And I was just sitting here thinking, I've given a lot of hairline to the Wyoming Senate and thinking about some of the things that, that are the most successful. And, I think about the early 70s when those guys had the courage to walk in there and set up a permanent mineral trust fund, taxing themselves to do it. Many of them were in the oil and gas industry, and they walked in, and that's what they had the courage to do. And thank God they did it. Can you imagine today trying to get that done? Just wouldn't happen. The Hathaway Fund, that was a real big reach. I mean, think about what that's done for our state. I could go on with a couple of other major items, but it almost feels like today that this is an opportunity that is kind of in that category. I mean, I agree with Director Westby. I think this is an industry that's just about ready to explode, and it can do it in our state and bring a lot of great things to this state. I don't know if this is the committee that wants to step up and bring something that might have that kind of impact, but what would be wrong with suggesting to our colleagues, for example, Madam Chairman, what about, we've got a lot of money in the rainy day fund, and it sits there and it draws a little interest for us. We wring our hands and it stays at about 1.8. What if we set aside 100 million of that? And we do today what Colorado did and have a little bit of a backstop that we could benefit from the interest off of that fund and put some frosting on the cake to what our agency is doing. That's the trust fund idea. That sort of resonated with me. And I get it. I get that it's a huge lift at a time when we're just not very good, colleagues, at being very proactive. Our legislature is pretty much reactive. And sometimes that hurts my heart. Anyway, I think there's some potential here. If we want to go after something big, I think now's the time to do it.
Okay, and Senator Guru?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Just to kind of add on to what my friend from Turner County was saying, listening to testimony today, and I too appreciate everybody coming out today. And, for me, the takeaway is just what Senator Landon was talking about. And I think this morning when Director Schober said, what are we going to do? Are we going to take what we get, or are we going to get what we want? Are we going to set up, to me, what we heard today is what economic diversification looks like. There's no silver bullet. There's no thing. It's going to be slivers, pieces. It's going to be improving our outdoor recreation, which then makes a better quality of life, which then brings more businesses. We've done so much to build our infrastructure, and we need to do more. But right now, I think we're at a precipice now where we've got the best tax structure in the country. We've got great infrastructure. We're putting money into broadband. We've got all these opportunities, whether it's with these federal funds that are coming that we're going to be talking about in the next couple of months, to be able to direct that into something big and to not do what I'm worried that we will do. And that's what my mother used to call frittered away. Are we going to fritter, or are we going to do something important? Something with a little vision to it. And the things that I heard today, and the things and I know we're going to hear more from Game and Fish, another piece of the puzzle, but these groups seem like they're doing what, last time I was on this committee a couple of years ago, that I think a lot of us challenged them to do. Get together, not be in silos, but actually work together, and they're doing it. And now we're starting to see the benefits, and we're starting to see what's possible. And so now the question is, are we going to step up and reward this kind of work? Or, and I know there's a lot of angst about it. I know there's a lot of, we need to take care. This isn't something this isn't a giveaway deal. This is something we have to have everybody in private sector be involved. We have to be involved in the public sector, and it has to be a partnership to be able to go forward. This can't be there is no big government solution to this. This is something that we have to all work on together. A lot of things, frankly, don't have a lot of applicability in my county because frankly, we've been working on a lot of this stuff for a long time. We've matured in our tourism business. But for the rest of the state, when I look around and I see nothing but opportunity. I see nothing but the future. I don't have a state park in my county that I'm aware of. and so when we talk about state parks, I like I say, I look at the opportunity. I look at what we can do. I look at what's possible. I listen to these folks, and I think, like I say, we're standing there. And I think it's this group. I think it is this group that can take that next step and kind of bring it to our colleagues at Plan and say, it's not the total answer, but it's an awful big piece. So, thank you, Madam Chair.
Any other comments or questions on this topic of agency funding? Seeing none, just to kind of echo, I think that's why I invited Mr. Castilian to come is, a lot of their decisions were driven because of Tabor. Voters weren't passing tax raising measures. And so, there were some good things that came from that and some not so great things. If you look at Colorado, they have a fee structure, very reliant on fees. They have automatic, calculators to make sure those fees go up over time. So they're not perpetually revisiting those. So those are some of the trade-offs. And then we heard earlier, that took a deliberate effort to combine their wildlife agency with their state parks. And I didn't mean to make y'all bristle when he mentioned that, but that's a real outcome that Colorado, you could hear there were growing pains about who identified as who and what that meant for those agencies to have to come together. So I'm not suggesting that that's the path we should be going down now. I wanted to let you guys sweat it out a little bit though. I'm glad. But maybe we do. I don't know. These are the things that are on the horizon if we, as we grapple with our budget. But it was more just that concept of, if we're serious about, I think lessening government is how do we create more enterprise opportunity? Because when our state was established, there was actually in our Constitution very little trust put in our legislature. It was supposed to be very, meet for a very short period of time, be a citizen legislature. And over the years, you see how we grow. We are debating things like the price of fingerprinting cards. And, have a very heavy-handed micromanagement mentality to a government that prides itself on being small and limited when we meet all the time throughout the year. So I just want to challenge my colleagues to kind of challenge some of their assumptions when they think that we're not big government. I would argue that we keep getting bigger and bigger. Boy, if we're going to debate $5 fingerprinting cards, is that what we were put here to do? So, to the extent that we want to really truly retain a citizen legislature that trusts commissions and boards and whatnot to come up with some ideas, and visiting with Mr. Castilian, that's a growing pain that they've had to go through too. So something to consider. Along those lines, I don't have a clear vision in my mind of how to carry this conversation forward about options. You presented a few things, and I think that, the notions of, do we want to look at existing revenue streams, through, I don't want to say lottery, just because I think those fights have already been had, but, we have sports betting where those dollars are going back to the general fund. If you look at the skill games, that's local money. And then I think school foundation is kind of split half and half aside from what goes to the gaming commission. But it is that's the question I have is we need a vision. I think that's the hard part we're lacking right now is what is that vision of how that should look? Senator Driscoll, as you mentioned, has had a vision. What if we establish a casino? That is a big vision. I don't know that he'll pick up on that work or if anyone on this committee wants to keep exploring those ideas. But I think that's the hard part right now is who among us and who among your agency and the executive branch and the governor's office is going to say, here's an idea and this is what we should do and let everybody react to that. So your thoughts, do you have a the big vision that we can start reacting to, or do you want us to charge ahead? And unfortunately, I've got that nagging need to try and make a difference. And so if you are looking at your chairs, I'm happy to maybe take a stab at it and maybe fail horribly. But anyway, just wanted your reaction on that.
Madam Chairwoman, we don't have any silver bullet that's going to solve this. I did raise my hand on the sports betting dollars. I don't know if you already earmarked that, but I'll raise it again. But I think that's going to be huge, honestly. But I will challenge myself and my team to keep thinking about this and come up with some other potential. We brought forward the trust fund idea. I don't want to say that we've bake sale the heck out of this thing over the last 15 years, but I can probably give you a list of 20 things that we brought forward, and I can bring them all back if you'd like, just to get the ball rolling again. I want to, like your vision, I want to think bigger. I'm tired of $1 million here, $1 million there. Just to get me off the general fund on just the park side is 15 million. So 7.5 million more a year. So it's not significant, but again, I go back to the mighty, but small, but mighty group, but it's still 7.5 million a year. And so what generates $7.5 million a year? And that's just to make us where we're at today, not where I want to grow this agency. So even $15 million a year, what generates $15 million a year? and how do we do that? So I will keep thinking. I will task our staff that is very good at thinking outside the box now that we've gone through several iterations of how do you reduce? How do you spend? How do you, how do you put $755 million request in for ARPA funds without having some really good ideas? So I will challenge my team to do that.
Alrighty.
Madam Chairman.
Any comments, Representative Sweeney?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. So I think the lottery's a great idea, except it doesn't produce really for the state. I think the quarterlies might be around $1 million, 1.5. So, perhaps it could get there. I think part of that goes to schools currently, if not all. So I don't know if that's the vehicle. I'm honestly thinking the trust funds probably got the most value. Where we get those funds from, that's the next question. I'm in agreement. Perhaps, I don't know how you transfer out of the permanent mineral trust funds into a trust. But if that would be possible, but as an investment tool into ourselves, into the state, I think that's valuable. And on sports wagering, that could be a component, but I think the estimate that I heard of 50 million a year, I don't think is realistic. What the industry is saying is probably a little north of 5 million a year is probably more possible. So if it was 50, that might be the key to the success of this. So, but I agree. We need to keep working on it because there is a ton of opportunity. And I'm thinking at this point, you can see the appetite in the legislature for fees and fee increases, and that's not a great option. And unfortunately, we couldn't get we got gas tax moved out of revenue committee, but it was decided it was going nowhere. So it wasn't even put to the House floor. So I think that's unfortunate. I think we should have the courage to move some of these things forward to the entire bodies. So, but I'm more than willing to work on those things, as unpopular as they might be.
Representative Landon.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I appreciate the representative's thoughts. I'm just sitting here thinking to myself that I'm not sure what precipitated the idea to get this agency off of the general fund. I think that's noble, and I think it's been okay for the Game and Fish and YDOT to move over. But the reason that I phrased it the way I did earlier, you know, frosting on the cake, is that I think that approach, I think, seems more realistic to me. And if we were to choose the trust fund idea, for example, I think what you could do, you could give the option to the legislature to retrieve that 100 million, for example, at any point in time. You just move it from LSRA. You couldn't move it from the Permanent Mineral Trust Fund because that's constitutionally protected. But we have a savings account. And the concept, the talking point is, are we willing to take some of our savings and invest it in something that we think is going to grow exponentially? And we could do some homework, and chances are for every dollar we put into this, we'll get $5 back. And conceptually, that sets up, think about how successful the Wildlife Trust Fund has been. It's been absolutely amazing. And had we not set that aside and just left it over in LSRA or something, would we still have done all those projects? Probably not. But we still have that. We have a $1 million trust fund, a $100 million trust fund sitting there for the wildlife. You could do the same for this area, is all I'm saying. And it reduces a little bit of what we've got in the rainy day fund, but we're investing in ourselves. We're probably not ready to do that today, but maybe the next meeting, and generate something that we could consider in that third meeting, whether we want to go forward with something or not. But just thinking out loud with everybody. I mean, it's easy to vote them down. I mean, we can try some things and see where we go from here.
All righty, any other comments, Representative Knapp?
I don't mean to temper all this excitement. However, I believe in enterprise accounts. I do. And I believe that you get there by fees, you know, and so while I believe that tourism will grow, we have lots of obligations on our plate, including education. So we can't really look at this in a tunnel either. I think that it's important that we get to a level that one of your goals is general fund neutral. And I think that's great. I think that's the first step, is general fund neutral. And programs like SWAT and the other things that you have on your plate that you're looking at, thinking outside the box, I think is amazing. That's one thing that more departments need to do. So like I said, I believe in enterprise accounts, and I believe that first step is general fund neutral, and you get there by fees and maybe some other diversions, but looking at it in a broad term, with education on our plate too, those diversions may well be going somewhere else. So just want to be realistic here, but I applaud the department. Thank you.
Any other comments or questions? I know we kind of are deviating from our normal format, but I think that this is kind of a fun exercise for us to be thinking. We've heard a lot of information today. Any other comments or questions? Okay. How about this, committee members? Let this all kind of sink in, and feel free to reach out to the director. I think we can always pick up if anyone starts developing an idea and wants to start maybe gelling a bit. We won't take this off as something we're going to no longer think about. But I do think, you know, we all need to think a little bit between now and our next meeting on an idea. That's our job, is come up with ideas. Okay, so we have a couple of other things on the agenda. I know it's we're winding down for our day. We only have two more things to really talk about. the Gray Rocks area, as well as an update on Hot Springs State Park. And so take us home if you wanted to jump into those topics, Director Westby.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Did you want to skip over the transferring state-owned parks back to cities and towns, or you want me to tackle that one first?
I didn't mean to do that, Director. Thank you. Committee members, in full disclosure, I probably need to buy readers and I just can't quite get myself there yet. So you'll see typos in my emails. I'll skip over things I can't see. So no, let's stick to the agenda. Let's talk about transferring state-owned parks back to cities and towns. And I know this was an idea brought by Senator Landon. So thank you for raising that. And if you wanted to kick us off with any introductory remarks on why you asked for this to be an interim topic, that would be appropriate.
Well, thank you, Madam Chairman. I was visiting with a couple of folks who just brought up the fact that and I assume it's throughout the state, but there were a couple of sites that were referenced where we literally have state park workers tending to properties in the middle of municipalities, for example. That caught my attention, and I just wondered out loud whether or not we still had the luxury of doing that anymore. In a climate that we're in, where we're literally reducing budgets by 10, 15, and sometimes 20%, can we really afford to take care of parks that are in the middle of a town, for example? So that was what prompted me to ask about it and ask the committee to consider it, and we took it up as an interim topic. A particular interest and one that came up to me was up in the northern part of the state in Sheridan County, for example. I don't mean to pick on either one of those parks in Manchester or Sheridan, but they're examples of, would those local folks be willing to take those over? And then we wouldn't have to spend the money to maintain them. So that's it.
Ready, Director.
Chairman, thank you.
Thank you, Senator Landon.
Thank you. Chairwoman Ellis and Senator Landon, thanks for setting this up. And just full disclosure, we have not had any local community approach us to take over some albatross in the middle of their town. So trust me on
Director,
that.
we haven't offered to take over Edna Kimball Wilkins down in Natrona County either. I'll pick on myself. I'm sure every county has something, but.
Right. And I know Bob McLaren's here from representing WAM, and I don't know if Chris, maybe he can step in and be able to comment when he has an opportunity, but we have 4 that come to mind just really quickly. Edna Kimball Wilkins there in Natrona County, Bear River, which is on the southwest corner of the state, kind of the entry into I-80 or into the state from I-80 from the west. Hot Springs State Park, which is obviously right there in the middle of Thermopolis, and Connor Battlefield, in which you referenced just there in Manchester. And the only one that I think would even be of interest to any of those local communities would be Connor Battlefield in Manchester. They're already running the facility. They pay us whatever they collect and whatever their expenses are. If there's anything over that, that's what they pay us to do that, or we pay them on any major construction. But other than that, it's a self-sufficient, the local communities running it right now. That would be the only one that I would say is probably of significant interest to even a local municipality. The rest of them, Thermopolis, I can't imagine that they would be interested in taking on our expenses up there, about $400,000 a year. We have another 80,000 in seasonals. That's just for full time. So it's probably $700,000 and some $1,000 a year that we spend to operate Hot Springs State Park. Now, I'm going to go back to the tourism hat that I put on. We're also over $40 million worth of economic impact by what we do at Thermopolis with Hot Springs State Park. So whether we do it and can afford to do it or the city does it, it's important to the community, to the state that a state park or something of significance is there on the way as the people travel through our state. And I could give you the economic impact on Bear River. Bear River, it's basically a welcome center. It's got a great city greenway right along the river. We have some buffalo and some elk there. It's a great tourism stop. I think it does slow people across. We got inside the building, we have some great exhibits. Cost for us, Bear River is $225,000 a year. Economic impact is about 4.5 million. So to go back to kind of what I was talking about earlier is now is the time to double down. Now is not the time for me to start shoving things away. Now I'm sitting here trying to just gather anything that we can bolster and make bigger and better and faster and stronger so we can help the outdoor recreation and tourism industry and help the cultural industry in our communities so we can have people have opportunities to come and spend money in our state. And so albeit I appreciate the comment and the exercise of going through and thinking it through. Our stance, at least on the agency side, is now going into the next topic. You'll see my excitement, even why I want to keep these in our quiver as products.
Senator Landon.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Thank you, Director. I appreciate it. And I suspected as much. I think it's always good to look in the mirror. I wondered to myself when I learned that we have over, I think, 200 markers of some sort out across our state too. And I just wondered if, as much as we're asking out of a pretty lean and mean department, are we okay to take care of everything that we have? I mean, so it's not just on parks, but it's on monuments. It's on all of these things that we've got to try to be aware of and take care of. And if you feel like we're in good shape and we can still handle them, I'm good with that. So.
Madam Chairwoman, Senator, so long as you guys keep authorizing my general fund, we'll keep doing it. Monuments and markers is a passion in our agency. Yes, it takes a little bit of time and money, but our people love what they do with the Monuments and Markers program. And we have people in-house that get out there with their brushes when they get damaged and their welders when they get damaged. And it's a labor of love, but they appreciate the opportunity to do it.
Other questions? Co-Chairwoman Flitner.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Director Westby, has the community of Manchester expressed an interest in takeover of Connor Battlefield? No. Okay. Thank you.
Madam Co-Chair,
Director.
Madam Chairman, Madam Co-Chair, nobody's approached us. And I'm sure Mr. McLaren, if you want to comment, you're welcome to speak on behalf of municipalities better than I probably should.
They don't.
Yep, Mr. McLaren, welcome to the committee and feel free to present any remarks you have prepared and we'll ask you some questions. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you, Madam Chair. None of our members have expressed interest in taking over these parks, but if it's the will of the legislature to look at this, we'd be more than happy to have a conversation about it. But city and town budgets, much like the state budgets, are a little thin, but happy to try to work with you if that's the direction you choose to go.
And Mr. McLaren, you're with the Wyoming Association of Municipalities, correct?
Yes, ma'am. I'm sorry.
Any questions for WAM? Seeing none, I understand it, right? There's the money piece of it, but I'm trying to think if there's an incentive that cities might draw them to having that management feature again. And so as you saw this pop up on our agenda, did you give that any consideration of, rather than just shifting the cost and the burden of managing these sites, did you contemplate, potential incentives that might entice municipalities?
We have not considered that, but we really didn't know what the topic was. So we were just here to understand, what the intent was and to try to work with the legislature, because you've been very good to cities and towns over my 40 years in the state. So, but happy to try to, on a case-by-case basis, work with an individual municipality to come up with a solution that works best for both parties.
Okay. Any other questions? Senator Schuler?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Just speaking on the Bear River Visitor Center, it's a huge impact. It is busy all the time. And it butts right up against the city's greenway. And it doesn't get used near as much. I mean, it does get used, but that state park is huge in terms of drawing tourists in And they find out an awful lot about Wyoming. And they have a lot of, of course, the buffalo there and the elk are a big draw, but the park itself, there are mountain bike trails. A lot of people are using to finding out a little bit more about those. In fact, I think there's a private group that's going to try to expand those trails a little bit. So that's a huge, huge issue, but I can pretty much say I'm meeting with the Evanston City Council here in about another week, and I'll throw it out to them, but I'm pretty sure they're not interested in taking that over. So thank you.
All righty, further questions from the committee? With that, is there anyone in the public that would like to comment on this particular topic of property ownership? I don't think I see anyone online, and it doesn't look like anyone in the audience. Okay, with that, we'll close the topic. Senator Land, do you want to bring a motion, or are you content with the discussion we've had today?
Well, that, Madam Chairman, that money-saving idea fell a little flat. So we'll leave that on the back burner for now. And I appreciate the added information from the department. Thank you.
Thank you for bringing the idea. All righty, with that, now we'll talk about the Gray Rocks Miracle Mile area and then updates on Hot Springs State Park. Readers.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. And truly want to thank you for this topic. I know in our excitement over the last year or two, trying to get staff and everybody excited about the potential and the future of our state and what we have to offer. A couple of years ago, if I would have brought forward, hey, what do you think about taking over Gray? Actually, I did a couple of years ago ask, what do you think about Gray Rocks? And I think I ran out of the office for at least an hour. Director Nesvik and I have talked about it for quite a few years now. And up until now, it's like, no, not only no, but heck no, I can't expand. I need more resources. I'm already stretched thin. Not to say that taking on Gray Rocks, we wouldn't be thin, but hopefully if we do it right, we'll be made whole. And we can make that impact that's needed. And so right now we've been working with Director of Game and Fish, Nesvik, on Gray Rocks and some other opportunities with the Bureau of Reclamation on ways to improve the product offerings that are offered right now at Gray Rocks. And I can let Director Nesvik kind of talk a little bit about the why about Gray Rocks and the why about Miracle Mile. And if you're not familiar with Gray Rocks or Miracle Mile, Gray Rocks is just outside of Wheatland, and it's the kind of the cooling storage pond reservoir for the power plant there. It's surrounded by camping spots. It's a fishery. Miracle Mile is just on the other side of the dam at Seminole, in between Seminole and Cordes Reservoir. It's a blue ribbon fishing area. Right now it's managed by the Bureau. Well, it's owned by the Bureau of Reclamation. The fishing is managed by the Game and Fish, but theoretically there's not a whole lot of land management, recreation land management, similar to what's happening at Gray Rocks. And so I'll let the director kind of give you an update on those. And Dave has been working, Director Glenn has been working with his team as well to try to get caught up to speed on what this would look like.
Thank you. Welcome, Director Nesvik.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity here, Director, to talk a little bit about something we've been working on for quite a while. And I will tell you, Madam Chair, that I did have to finally move to a place you don't want to go. And while it didn't transcend to reality, my wife did tell me that it made me look like I had more wisdom. I don't necessarily agree with her, but I got to go there. So anyway, I'll start with Gray Rocks, because really the other two opportunities I'll talk about don't necessarily require any legislative action, but Gray Rocks certainly would. Director Westby knows the process well. But really, this is one, and Representative Haroldson can darn sure attest to some of the issues that have arisen over the last several years with Gray Rocks. You all have got a map. I believe you should have been passed around a map, says Gray Rocks Reservoir on the top. And this is a third large body of water in Platte County that is a good fishery. It's got a lot of recreational water use, and it's got a relatively small land area around it
that's accessible to the public. It's basically the entire south eastern shore. The other side of the reservoir is not accessible. There's no main roads into that. And so what's happened is that as over time, as the use has been regulated and the experiences have become better at Glendo and Guernsey State Parks in Platte County, a lot of those folks that kind of like the old party scene have transitioned to Greater Rocks. There's no reservation requirement. There's no really developed campsites. It's kind of a free for all. That actually worked for quite some time. It didn't create user conflict. We didn't hear a lot of complaints from the public, but that has definitely changed here in the recent past. And now, we've even got to the point with it where we're concerned with resource impacts from all of that use in an unregulated way without any development there at all. As you're well aware, Game and Fish is not a land use camping managing type of an entity. And we do own, the commission owns ground, but we manage most of those grounds for either hunting access or fishing access or wildlife habitat. So we entered into an agreement because really there was, the power plant has been an exceptional partner here. They want to provide access to the public. They own the ground around it, but they want the public to be able to use it. But, they're in the same boat. They don't have a way to necessarily manage it. That's not the business that they're in. And so we entered into an agreement with them. We did place some signage. We entered into agreements to take care of the comfort stations or the outhouses there and to do some garbage removal. But over time, people have, and with the increased use, there have been increased problems with things like the use of fireworks, the use of ATVs off-road, the calls at 2 o'clock in the morning for loud camps. And we're just simply, we have one game warden in Wheatland. We have another game warden that's in north of Wheatland, between Glendo and Wheatland. And we simply don't have the skill set, number one, but also the manpower to be able to deal with running essentially what's turning into the equivalent workload of a state park. That's when we initially entered into some discussions with the power plant and also Director Westby and his crew here several years ago. I do think, we really need the power plant to initiate action in order to start to move down this road and start to initiate a process. But I do think there is opportunity here. I do think that the benefits are an increased experience for both our residents and our non-residents. Well, this does certainly have use from folks from south of the border that we've talked about all throughout the day. There's a lot of resident use as well. And the local folks, I think, are many of them anyway, are as unhappy with the visitor experience that's occurring there now as non-residents. So certainly opportunity. I look forward to working with the director and continuing this. We've gotten to a new step as he indicated, where I think there's a lot more eagerness on the part of state parks to do something here. The other thing I would say with this is, we've got an opportunity here to do this maybe a little bit different than some of the other state parks, because there is some wildlife habitat opportunity. There is potentially some other uses with some of this land that might be beneficial to other uses, sportsman kind of uses. And so I think there could be more of a partnered opportunity here if this was to, I don't know what this looks like at the end, if it's a state park with a game and fish wildlife habitat management area attached to it. I don't know what it looks like, but there's a real opportunity here for us to work with state parks, fairly similar to a lot of what we do at Glendo. We've kind of already cracked the code here at Glendo with this. So that's the Gray Rock situation. These other two could potentially require legislative action, but not necessarily. The Bureau of Reclamation came to us and asked us about the property that's owned by the Bureau of Reclamation north of Glendo. And on your map, you can see those pink areas on the far northwest corner, right up on the Converse Platte County line. And they approached us with, hey, what, we are not recreational use managers, game and fish. You plant birds there. There's bird hunters that use it. There's fishermen that use that stretch of the river. There's waterfowl hunters. There is access into it and it needs to be managed. Game and Fish, would you be interested at all in taking this over? Similar discussion with Miracle Mile. And our first response has been, we have the opportunity to use that now. If we invest additional resources, what is the gain for sportsmen who will be paying for, taking over management that really is your responsibility right now because you own the ground? A very similar situation with the Miracle Mile that I'll talk about next. As we've talked this with them, one of the places where we've come is that I do see some potential. I see a good discussion to be had if they were willing to actually transfer fee title those lands over to the state of Wyoming. And, they haven't, certainly with the federal government, there's a lot of red tape and there's a lot of process, but they haven't said no to that. And they've expressed an interest in having that discussion. I'll just transcend right into Miracle Mile because it's a very similar situation, but the Miracle Mile, as the director indicated, is right at the south end of Pathfinder Reservoir. It's between Pathfinder Reservoir and Cordes Dam. It's very close to Seminoe State Park. The lands along that stretch of the river, it's a blue ribbon fishery. It's been used since I was a little kid. It's been always known as it's a tailwater. It's right below a dam, and it's just a tremendous fishery. The number of fish per mile is why they call it the Miracle Mile. And it does provide a lot of other wildlife habitat. There are opportunities at the north end of this potentially for some additional development, habitat development for wetlands or for even enhancing the fishery even more. And so again, same kind of discussion, if Bureau of Reclamation was willing to, for the long term, actually transfer fee title those lands to the state of Wyoming, this might be something that we could darn sure look at. Both of these, the North Glendo and the Miracle Mile, would potentially be areas where we would do a similar kind of an arrangement with state parks, where we would take care of some of the management, the stuff that's really in our wheelhouse, and they could take care of the stuff that's in their wheelhouse. But certainly both would have to generate fees to be able to make state parks whole, and so that it's not a money sink for state parks. And none of those details have been worked yet, but I thought it was important to this entire discussion just to bring up these opportunities that we've been working on. The last thing I would say, and it's relevant to the discussion you've been all engaged in all day long today, is, you've heard from Director Schober and Director Westby about their passion and their interest in expanding the tourism economy in Wyoming and bringing more folks to our state and using our resources because we've got a lot of them. And I will tell you that, Game and Fish has very similar interests. However, we have a little bit different mission and a little bit different role. And there are places that I am concerned about across our state with increased use. We have some of the most tremendous wildlife habitats in the country, in the world. And we've certainly, this last summer was really an indicator for us in places like the Snowy Range and the Bighorn Mountains, those kind of places where the use was starting to get to a level where, sustained over time, I think we would need to look pretty hard at if there are some wildlife impacts from that, and if we were actually reducing the available habitat quality and quantity. So a little bit different missions. We have different statutory charges in state parks, but in these particular instances that I brought up, I think that some kind of a cooperative agreement between us and state parks and other local entities might really be a benefit for our residents, might be a benefit for our local communities, and is something that we're darn sure ready to engage in discussions on. I'd be glad to answer any questions.
Thank you. Questions for Director Nesvik? Senator Salazar.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Director, so do you have any thoughts on revenue, what this would bring in? If let's just dream for a minute, and this continues to go down, what kind of revenue on some of these properties, if they were transferred over, as far as fees, would be generated for both of you?
Directors?
Yeah, I think I'd ask you first, maybe. I haven't done an estimate, but.
Madam Chairwoman, Senator, I don't think at this point we've reached that level within the analysis. What we have in state parks to even get to a point where we ask you for legislative approval and designation as a state park, we have to go through, by statute, we have to go through what's called a site criteria process, where we bring in stakeholders around the area. We bring in private, public people to sit around the room and talk about the project. Well, first it needs to be initiated by the landowner. So we've received, like the Gray Rocks, we've received a letter saying that they have interest in us starting the site criteria process. So we are just on the leading edge of getting that one started. We have not gone so far on the Bureau side of getting formal written requests from the Bureau that they're interested in making it become a state park. I think they're still trying to decide, do they give it to the Game and Fish, or do they give it to us, or do they give it to Game and Fish and becomes a state park? Well, that still remains to be seen. So I guess long answer to a really short question. That would be vetted in the due diligence report of the site criteria process.
Additional questions, Representative Sweeney?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. So let's unwind back up a little bit on Gray Rocks. Number one, I don't see any pink on this map. So we're not talking about Bureau of Rec at all on Gray Rocks.
Madam Chairman,
Director.
Representative Sweeney, that it's owned by the power company, Basin Electric Power.
Okay, and then that leads into my follow-up. So they've announced the ownership of that coal-fired facility, which isn't under the preview of the Public Service Commission. So we really, as state, don't have a role in that, but they've already announced, I think it's 2030 and perhaps 2035 or sooner, they're dismantling that facility and shutting it down. What impact does that have on that reservoir when they shut that down?
Directors, do you know?
Yeah, Madam Chair, Representative Sweeney, I think that would be part of this discussion, because preserving that opportunity, both from a wildlife perspective and a recreational perspective, is important. And that, in our initial discussions with Basin Electric, has been one of their interests, is preserving that. And so, and I don't know what kind of costs that would involve, but that would need to be part of the site criteria analysis to know if there's going to be some cost that the state's going to have to incur down the road if that power plant is shut down. But I think it's, water development in our state, any water development in our state is a high priority for our department. It's a high priority for our state. And I think it would be worth us taking a really hard look at to make sure we didn't lose a reservoir like that. It would have agricultural impacts, recreational impacts. And, there may be some other type of power generation kind of a unit that could use that existing infrastructure. I don't know that. I'm speaking outside my wheelhouse now, but I think all those things need to be evaluated.
Follow-up questions?
Yes, and then just so I understand, thank you, Madam Chairman. On Glendo and Miracle Mile, we're in particular talking about Bureau of Rec has indicated that they may be willing to deed over those properties, did I misinterpret that?
Director.
Madam Chair, Representative Sweeney, they've indicated that they're willing to have those discussions with us and that there is a process so we could see that it is potentially feasible. It's different at Glendo than it is at Miracle Mile, just because at Glendo, it's entirely owned by the Bureau of Rec. It's bordered by several state trust lands. At Miracle Mile, there is Bureau of Rec and BLM. And so there's several other steps in the process there, because the BLM has to be involved as well. But there is a process. They've made no commitments, but other than they're interested in transferring the management of these things to the state, and they're interested in having all options on the table.
Questions from the committee, Representative Haroldson and then Senator Landon.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Do I have permission to address a couple of Representative Sweeney's questions about LRS and the power plant that used to that reservoir?
Let's committee members focus on asking questions of these members and understand maybe what the ask is or next steps, but certainly in a minute, but let's maximize our time with our panelists to answer questions. Senator Landon.
I have questions too, if you wouldn't mind.
Yep, let's go with your questions, Representative Haroldson.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairman. So real quick question, when it comes to the Miracle Mile, so the first question, Miracle Mile, it going from game and fish regulated and controlled to a state park concept, what would that be for all of our outfitters that are running the Miracle Mile? So that'll be the first question. Is that going to change the fee structure? Is that going to change how they do that process? Because I know that's a huge aspect of the economy up in that country. And then the second would be the red border that we're showing on Gray Rocks Reservoir. Is that the current? Because it's a little weird on the dam side. It's actually it's bigger than that is currently. We actually have more room in that reservoir because you can go all the way up to the dam face, but you just can't go to your morning glory inlets. So would that stay the same? And then the third question, would there be access to the north side of Gray Rocks if it were to become a state park? Would that be something we would try to grab access to? Anyways.
Panelist, if you can answer, and then just so you're aware, it looks like we have Mr. Nalon from State Parks on the Zoom. So if we need to refer or draw on his expertise, I just wanted to call your attention that he's available. Panelists?
So, Madam Chair, Representative Haroldson, I'll start with the Gray Rocks question. So my understanding is that red border describes the fee title that's currently part of Basin Electric's portfolio. So the question of could it be expanded, I would say without some additional partners, private landowners, probably not. There would be other folks that have to be involved in that. Help me again, I'm sorry, with the Miracle Mile question.
Current management.
Okay. And outfitters. Okay. Yeah. So currently those folks that are engaged in outfitting along the Miracle Mile are subject to the federal requirements. And so they require permits for outfitting. Now, I can't say for sure if Bureau Rec does, but I know BLM does. And so they are subject to that potentially now. If this was to become state lands of any kind, there are no commercial regulated fishing permits required in Wyoming along the Miracle Mile or really any other waters. It's strictly federal, so they would not necessarily be impacted. In fact, they would pay less. Now, with that said, there has been interest from members from many of your colleagues in looking at that because of complaints about competing use and overcrowding and those kind of things. But at least today, there's not a statutory requirement to regulate those industries.
Okay, further questions? Senator Landon.
Madam Chairman, thank you. I really appreciate the report. And anytime we can get a big power cooperative to offer us property, I'm very interested. And then if it involves the federal government and the Bureau of Rec is possibly indicated that it wants to give us some land, we'll take it in Wyoming and lower their 55% or whatever it is. I guess my question is, gentlemen, if you need anything out of us at this point, I think I can only speak for myself, but I'm really interested and excited in what you've said, because I think the potential is amazing. So that's the first question. Second question is, I have heard that the Bureau of Rec property around Alcova Lake has also come into conversation. Have either of you heard about that? And maybe a willingness by the Bureau of Rec to turn that property over to the state of Wyoming?
Directors.
Yeah, Madam Chairwoman and Senator, thank you for the question. Going to your second question first on the Alcova, we've been in conversation with, all right, so just a quick explanation of how the Bureau of Reclamation works in the state of Wyoming. We have two area offices in the state of Wyoming. You got the Mills office that oversees everything except for Keyhole State Park. And then you have the Rapid City office that oversees Keyhole Reservoir, not State Park. And so there's been some discussions with the Bureau of Reclamation out of the Rapid City office and the area manager up there to have them just go through the federal process to just give the land to the state and to the state parks. And then all they do is manage the water operations, the dam operations. We manage the land recreation. Demon Fish manages the hunting and fishing. That has parlayed into some conversations in the Mills office It's very high level conversation. At least they're notified that there's some ideas and conversations happening in Northeast Wyoming. We have not broached one-on-one conversations with them about the other, Boysen, Glendo, Guernsey, Seminole. Did I miss one? I'm sure I did miss one, but all those others. But we are interested in taking over ownership of all of the reservoir recreation lands as well.
Madam Chairman, thank you.
Follow up?
I would just say maybe we have to walk before we run, but all of what you've talked about would be pretty exciting for Wyoming. And I think that the opportunity would be immense. To take over Alcova, for example, you're talking, several $1 million a year in impact to whoever, to the state. So it would be huge.
Okay, further questions? Co-chairwoman Flintner?
Madam Chairman, thank you. And regarding gray rocks, it's unfortunate, I think, that Basin Electric's not here because I'm curious what their end game is. Do they foresee selling that to the state? What sort of conversations have you had with them?
Yeah,
I can throw some out. Madam Chairman, Representative Flitner, we did have a conversation with someone from Basin Electric talking about when they were closing. I believe it was 2032, Representative Sweeney. And they said at this point in time, they did not have any intention of selling that. The other thing I would throw out as well is that reservoir was built with federal dollars. So there has to be a recreation aspect on that. So whoever owns that piece of property, based on what we know, it still has to have some sort of open recreation aspect for the public as well.
Follow up?
And thank you, Madam Chairman. And do they currently irrigate with that water?
Directors, any knowledge on that question?
Madam Chair, Madam Co-Chairman, yes, they do.
Okay, thank you.
Madam Chair, you asked if they irrigated out of that. I'm not sure that you're mistaken that I think they use it as cooling water for the power plant.
They do, but there are downstream irrigators.
Oh, downstream.
That obviously that water is a benefit to downstream irrigators all the way into the Platte system because it holds water.
Further questions for our directors? I think to Senator Landon's point, I think at this point, there are more steps that need to occur before we take any action. Is that a correct understanding? Where this is just kind of background information in case something comes up further along the process. Is that correct?
Madam Chairwoman, that's exactly correct. One, I wanted to build on the excitement of what we're trying to accomplish by growing our products, growing our potential offering to the state outdoor recreation and tourism industry. Get it on your radar if you're interested that when these site criterias are happening around the state, please, when we call you, and we want legislators sitting in the site criteria panel to ensure that we get that upfront knowledge of what was transpired. And then because for us to take it over as a management and or ownership, we have to come to the legislature to get, similar to what we talked about, being able to buy a piece of property. If we're going to create a new state park or even expand our management at an existing state park like Glendo, we need to come through the site criteria process. We need to go through the legislative process to expand our management boundaries. And so it's a heads up that it's coming in hopes that if it makes it out of the site criteria process, at least on the ones that are going to affect us, and I can't speak on behalf of the Game and Fish, the ones that affect us will have to come through the legislative body to potentially gain some legislation to expand our management areas. And this could happen there's a whole lot of these that once we started talking about the potential, there's Beartooth Ranch outside of Cody, there's Alkali Creek outside of Hyattville, there's Levitt Reservoir out of Shell, other new reservoirs. Just we've been talking to the water development about the potential of other new reservoirs in the state. There's some office state land investment lands and creating some state parks on those lands. There's some products in Southwest Wyoming that we kind of talked about with the SWAT, some ORV parks that I talked about, making this as a big outdoor recreation ORV state. So there's a whole bunch of these. So I think the intent was to get it on your radar, be prepared as to whatever potential legislation after the site criteria process and after anything that the Game and Fish has to review, that there's going to be some things coming down the line. And again, trying to build that excitement for what we are trying to do to shape the revenue stream of the state of Wyoming.
Thank you. One question about the Gray Rocks Reservoir. You know, you mentioned that this is owned by a utility. I am concerned just about damage to the resource, and that's clearly their resource. So, you know, to the extent that there's damage, that's on them. But the other is just activity that's occurring. Could you talk about this being a bit of a overflow, kind of turning into a party zone? When we worked on the legislation, giving you some flexibility with your funding this last session, we got a lot of information about how you hire law enforcement to ensure safety and things are happening in the parks. And so that is, I guess, a bigger concern of mine is, you know, between now and when you come to us, if, you know, it meets the criteria of maybe becoming eligible to become a state park, what kind of conversations are you having to make sure that this area is being properly overseen for things like crime and responding to concerns? And so that is just kind of a bigger, broader question of what do we do between now and then, but I am worried about public safety.
Yeah, Madam Chairman. So currently, and for the last several years now, we have been, as part of this agreement with Basin Electric, we've placed signs, we have camping limits there, and we enforce those camping limits, which does help because it, what folks like to do there is go, you know, beginning of summer, put their camper up there and just leave it there all summer long and use it whenever they want to. So we do have camping limits. We do enforce those. We've shortened those. We have also taken some parts of the reservoir and turned it into day use only so that they can't overuse it with, and it doesn't take away that experience from people that are just going out there for the day and trying to fish off the bank. We have instituted no off-road vehicles in the part of the area that we manage, and we enforce that. But all of those things are, fireworks is another one. All of those things and the enforcement of those is becoming a pretty significant workload, and it's 24/7. When basically once the summer really gets kicked off, Memorial Day weekend through Labor Day weekend, it's a significant workload. There's calls out there every day, and a lot of use. The sheriff's office does respond to, you know, a lot of the public safety complaints and violations of the law, drug use, that kind of stuff. But you know, Platte County doesn't have a big sheriff's office either. So it's definitely a concern for our folks as well.
Alrighty. Well, Representative Harrelson, if you had any information you wanted to add, and, you know, to that even law enforcement piece, any information you want to share with the committee, I'd certainly welcome it. But thank you for whatever comments you'd like to offer.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. So just a couple clarifications. Unit 3 was potentially scheduled for a shutdown in 2033. So Tri-State Energy is a 23% owner in LRS. LRS is a cooperative owner. It's a multi-owner site. So it actually isn't just Basin Electric that owns it. It's a multi-owned site. So there's a potential we could see a unit drop, but they just put almost $1 billion SCR in Unit 1. It's considered probably one of the best units in the country right now, short of Dry Fork. So I don't foresee it dropping right away. The other cool part is short of morning glory maintenance and spillway maintenance, that dam is solid and should stay solid for a long time. So I don't believe we'll see a fishery loss. It's not considered an irrigation dam in any way, shape, or form, but there are irrigation rights that are capable of being pulled off of the Laramie River drainage system, which is what LRS placed Gray Rocks in. So I don't know. I think that might have answered a couple of the questions I heard. And just a background, I did 8 years working at LRS, and I was the outside maintenance guy on that dam. So I've spent many, many hours on that dam. So I understand it pretty well just in its structure and nature.
Any follow-up from directors or? Okay, sounds good. Well, thank you. Is there any final thing you'd like to say on that particular topic before we move on with our update on the Hot Springs State Park? Okay, sounds good. Let's move on to Hot Springs State Park. And upon that, we'll open it up for public comment for people in the audience. I don't think we're taking action. So if you have a burning desire to speak right now, let me know. If not, we'll just continue on.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. I'm going to turn it over to Deputy Director Nealon in Minnesota, Wisconsin, sorry. Oh, my. Oh, my. I'm sorry. And he'll give the update.
Welcome.
Madam Chairman, thank you very much. Nick Nealon, Deputy Director, State Parks and Cultural Resources. We're at the end of the day, so I'll try to be concise and brief. Just a little bit of history for those who are new to the situation. The particular focus of this update is on the two concessions that we've been discussing for quite a while. The Star Plunge, whose lease expired in 2008, and the Days Inn Hotel, whose lease expired in 2011. We entered into month-to-month agreements after the expiration of those leases while we tried to negotiate new agreements. Both my predecessors and myself tried to negotiate new agreements unsuccessfully. In 2019, the Senate File 116 changed the nature of what we are able to do. That law eliminated our ability to have month-to-month leases and required that we go out to RFP for any concessions. We did so in July of 2020. We went out for an RFP to run both two RFPs, excuse me, one to run the Days Inn and one to run the Star Plunge. We received no responses to the RFP for the Days Inn and only one for the Star Plunge. Kind of left us in a position where we were not going to be able to have long-term agreements with either of those concessionaires. And so now we're changing our focus to kind of stick with the theme of the day, to try to look at some more exciting opportunities that we have available to us. We had a meeting just a couple of weeks ago with that Representative Winter and Senator Cooper attended with some of our staff and a potential investor from outside the state of Wyoming, someone who has a history of working with hot springs in different parts of the country and is interested in potentially investing a large sum of money in our park. We are reverting to the master plan that was completed within the last 5 years, and trying to find ways to build some more exciting and interesting facilities in the park. The facilities that are there, the ones that we no longer have long-term agreements with, are older facilities and in need of considerable repair. And so we're trying to shift our focus to what can we do next. Someone mentioned Senator Driscoll earlier and his excitement for Hot Springs State Park, which also was a motivating factor for us. Kind of his excitement was and is contagious. And whether we try to pursue the casino idea or not, he does have some other really interesting ideas about indoor water parks, larger, newer facilities, newer hotels, and some other collaborative projects, possibly with the Dinosaur Center and some other entities in Thermopolis. So that's the basic situation. That's where we are with things now. And as Director Westby mentioned earlier, for some of the larger fund requests through the federal dollars that may or may not become available, one of our requests was for a considerable sum to possibly build a new hotel and a water park in Hot Springs State Park. So we're excited about the opportunities. We have a team of folks, a district manager and the staff up there who are working really hard to develop plans for the future. And I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Sorry, my mic wasn't on. Questions for the director? Representative Sweeney.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. So how would the ARP funds, I'm not quite tracking, would that be an enticement to someone with a further RFP on a long-range plan? We could possibly use the ARP funds on infrastructure or to purchase the asset or what that might look like.
Madam Chairwoman.
Director.
And Representative Sweeney, thank you. Our thought on that was that we would have the ability to improve the product there, building the infrastructure, to hope to find a good managing partner that could operate it for us. It's one thing that I think we've heard loud and clear from you, and I think I've even said it myself. I don't necessarily want to get into the hotel or pool business. I want to have the opportunity to offer it as a product and find somebody good to manage it for us from a private perspective. And not to say that there's not some profit in it. And if it does so, I will be the first to say, yes, I'm interested. But I also know that I heard some of the conversations from several of you today about, be careful where you overstepping into the private sector. But from a financial standpoint, there's a possibility to make a lot more money on taking it over ourselves. And it could be that funding mechanism that we talked about earlier. But I'm also very cognizant on, where do you cross that line over acting like a business, behaving like a business, and crossing the line where you're overly competing. And we do understand that, that line for sure.
Thank you, Director. I'm going to ask a question that is completely born out of ignorance. So anyone watching or listening or on this committee, please refrain from sending me hate mail. But has the topic come up of what is the value in removing this as a state asset? Because I think when you look at hot springs and other high-end hot spring locations, they tend to all be private. And so I can see it being a barrier for any private investor wanting to dump a ton of money into an asset that they'll never fully own. And so again, I don't know, I know enough to know I'm probably asking a question that's going to get me some hate mail, but can you just walk me through why that's maybe a bad idea or why that maybe hasn't been talked about? But I don't know if, I'm just trying to think if I were trying to make that investment, how do we attract that investor? And I don't see how we do that.
Madam Chairwoman, the question is valid and it's something that we grapple with quite a bit. And Senator Grew could probably help me through some of the concession reasonings why it happens and why we probably are offering a 20, 25, 30-year lease term to a potential investor that wants to come in and do this. No different than the ones that are there now. They had a 50-year lease. If they promised to invest, X many dollars at the time to build and operate the facility, you get 20, 30, 50 years to recoup your initial investment and then obviously have to operate it as a financial venture. And Senator Grew, I think I would lean towards you because of the resident expert of concessionaires. I haven't done one. I have been on the other side in negotiated contracts with concessionaires. I've never been on the other side on the venture capitalism that it takes to put something forward to do that. But that's exactly what Deputy Director Nayland was talking about with the individual that came to us and just said, we're interested. So there's other people out there that are interested with dollars that are willing to come forward and negotiate a deal to do exactly what you just said, is put millions of dollars into a facility knowing that over the course of 20 years, you would have the ability to recoup that upfront cost. But
further questions? Senator Grew?
Just a comment. Yeah, that's, it's just like going, like any business person going and talk to your bank and say, I need $100 million to make this resort work. How many years do I have to, how many year lease do I have to make that, to make that fly? And it's gonna be a long time. So it's that kind of, if you're gonna attract that kind of investment, you're right. There's one of two ways to do it. It's either a 99-year lease or some type of lease like that, or just go ahead and sell the property and partner with them and then put it back on the tax rolls. Something we talked about in reverse earlier, go back the other way and just let the private sector make its mark. I think there's good arguments to be made for both ways. Great to keep the asset. It's always nice, state like to own it and, have someone make money on it for a long time and get revenue from it. That's great, but something to be said for putting it back on the rolls as well. So, and it's just finding that sweet spot and finding those developers. But the way it's going now, it's kind of sad, frankly, just from my view, because it's seemed like such a wonderful opportunity.
Madam Chairwoman.
Mr. Nayland?
Madam Chairwoman, if I could, and Director Westby could probably speak to this in greater detail than I can, but with Hot Springs is also not a property that it came to us in a different way, and it's not a property that I think that we could sell in any case. It's going to revert to another entity if we were to stop owning it.
Yeah, Madam Chairwoman, we were,
Okay, we're having some good sidebar conversations. Director Westby, let's get some answers out loud on the mic.
Was part of a treaty with the Native Americans. And so the transfer back to private probably wouldn't happen in a very easy way, if at all. But the same concept of what Representative Sweeney said to Senator Grew is part of what we're looking for with some ARP fundings is how do we sweeten that pot? How do we get that, instead of a $50 million loan that you have to get as a business, how do we get that down to 20? So we can either decrease that lease or get more potential people that have the ability to put in for the RFP. So then we're not stuck with one RFP. And that's where I think we're hoping to get with some of the ARPA funds is how do we put some of our, I'll say some of our own money, because I'm assuming once we get it, it's ours. So, and like I told Director or CEO Durrell, I said, just give me all the money and I'll change the world and make it easy on yourself. So that's the concept of why we're thinking the way we are is how do we sweeten the pot to a private investor? How do we do it ourselves? And then we can have 50 people propose to manage it as opposed to even having to put any upfront dollars. And then we could just go to a 5-year management agreement, and we own the property. So there's all sorts of different ways, but having a little bit of flexibility of upfront one-time cash sure does make things a little bit more interesting in the conversation. And I've almost taken you right to 5.
We're close, but we still have 4 minutes. Co-Chair Flintner.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. And Director Westby, what has the state done in terms of a partnership with those private entities at Hot Springs? What has been our investment back into those properties over the course of time?
Director.
Madam Chairwoman, Madam Co-Chair, we have not put any funds into those properties. I shouldn't say any. I'm sure we've helped along the way with certain infrastructure issues that they may or may not have had, but the intent of the contract up until then is it's been all on them to do this, and holding their feet to the fire to uphold their master plans has been difficult. And that's why we've been under contract negotiations for almost 12 years now. And we're past the point. Legislator, this body 2 years ago put in place law that said that we had to cancel all month-to-month agreements, and anything over 5 years, we have to go out to RFP. Well, that's where we're at. So it basically forced our hands and forced the local businesses to understand that it's not political. Now it's law. This is what state parks has to do, because every time we try to just enforce a contract, I'd be getting a call from a legislator, I'd be getting a call from the governor's office, or I'd be getting a call from somebody putting pressure back, saying, back off of my friend or back off of that private entity up there. And so to answer your question, what have we put in there financially? Nothing to date. Also in the capital construction bill, what we were instructed by the capital construction bill in a footnote, it offered up the state parks to use up to $3 million of our fees to address needs, remedies. Yeah, remedies at Hot Springs State Park. So we have $3 million that we can spend out of our fee money to help with any remedies, and that it's a broad term. So if we want to use that to help fix up an existing, or do we want to sweeten the pot into another RFP, that can happen with or without ARPA.
Okay, further questions?
Just to follow up.
A follow-up, Madam Co-Chair?
And just, thank you, Madam Chairman. And just the reason I ask, when you talk about sweetening the deal, when I think about as a permittee that has federal grazing leases, say for instance, we want to do a water development or a fencing project, we don't bear that cost. The federal government shares that cost. They provide materials, we provide labor. And so I guess when we think about how we could possibly sweeten that pot and bring in some more entities that might be interested in that RFP, perhaps as a state, we should be considering what our investment might be.
Director?
Madam Chairwoman, Co-Chairman Flitner, I couldn't agree with you more, but I also want to take just one slight step back and understand that these businesses pay the state of Wyoming 0.5% of their gross revenues. They get to put 2.5% into a maintenance reserve and a capital construction reserve. The rest of it, they get to keep themselves. And so the state of Wyoming is only realizing 0.5% of those revenues. So whereas we could absolutely negotiate a better deal for the state of Wyoming, and I'd be more than happy to put some more money into their business to make them more money so I make more money. But our hope was that we would get really good contractors up there to really bolster the economy of that county in the state for tourism. But we're not seeing it at this point. So, but I agree. Short answer.
Further questions for the directors on Hot Springs? Representative Winter?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chairman. And with reference to what the state supplies to these folks, they're getting that water for nothing. And that is a big, big item that I don't think is being considered. I mean, they pay nothing for that. And that's what the whole purpose of them being there is, that water. So I think there's a lot of things that we can do to enhance the state's position. One thing we're not doing is enforcing the contracts. That's, I think, been one of the big problems, that they've kind of buffaloed the state of Wyoming, and they're taking advantage of it. So I think we just have to get pretty tough with them. And I think this gentleman from Alaska that came in at that meeting, he's got a lot of good ideas, and he's got some money to invest. So I think we need to utilize that where we can. And so I think Director Westby is certainly aware of that, and he's working with him, I believe. So the water is the main thing, and the state does provide that. So.
Madam Chairwoman.
Director.
Representative Winter, I can't believe I forgot about that. But yeah, absolutely. You're spot on. They pay nothing for that water.
I know a lot of people paying attention to this issue and working on it. So, happy to keep it on the interim topic. Let us know if you have updates and want it to be a continued item on the agenda. Along those lines, if we have thoughts on how to bolster the state's position, please just communicate with my co-chair and I, and we'll make sure we keep this on the agenda as long as we need to for future meetings, because I know this is an important issue and one that's been going on for a long, long time. So hopefully we'll make some progress. Representative Sweeney.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. So just one last thought. So if we were to be lucky enough to utilize some ARP funds and set some, say it was 20 million aside, would we then go back out in the marketplace for RFPs? Because there's probably some other national operators out there that are operating, frankly, in national parks that might also be interested at that point. Would that be kind of how you envision the process?
Director?
Madam Chairwoman, Representative, yes, I think by law, we have to go out to RFP. Right now, the RFP process is over. And Nick, please correct me if I'm wrong. Go ahead if you want to knock this one.
Madam Chairman, yes, we're, one of the things that we're doing right now is that we're preparing an RFI to try to seek information from folks like those that the representative mentions to see what types of people from around the country are interested or might be interested in doing something at Hot Springs State Park. So we're already there.
Okay. Any other comments about this issue? Seeing none, is there anyone in the audience that wants to testify on Hot Springs State Park? Is there anyone online that would like to testify? There is not. Okay, with that, public comment is closed. Committee, that brings us to the end of the day. We are 4 minutes over schedule. I apologize for that. Staff, I think we have been doing directives as we've been going along. Do you want to just maybe do a quick recap of our day so that it's all fresh in our minds? And then just I want to remind committee members that some of the skill game operators in Cheyenne have arranged for a reception at Tuskers, which is on Pershing Boulevard and Ridge Road. You should have received some information in your emails. And so it's just east of here on Pershing. Certainly not a mandatory event, but I do think it's important for our legislative body to start understanding what these games look like, and they can explain what is internally happening in these machines. And so would highly encourage you to go attend that event. But let's get a quick recap from LSO.
So Madam Chairwoman, Mary Beth can step in if I miss one, but from our perspective, we're going to follow up with the Office of Tourism and find the legal analysis that went into the film incentive program and the sort of factors that need to be satisfied in order for that to be constitutionally sound. We're going to keep our eye on the subcommittee on capital interpretive plan and wayfinding when we understand who the legislative appointments are, and we'll share that information with the committee. Just as a reminder, there were a number of volunteers for a working group to work on that film incentive program on the committee. I don't know if the committee is interested in those names. I can recount those now. And then lastly, there is a directive to LSO to basically draft a bill to authorize state parks to purchase the Trails Program building in Lander. Two of the sort of details of that bill are the first, that we need to make it clear in the bill that this is a one-time, and that if there were any additional purchases that state parks wanted, that legislative authority would need to be granted for those additional purchases. And then second, there needs to be some sort of reporting mechanism whereby state parks keeps this committee and appropriations apprised of the process. So that's what we're working on.
Okay, that sounds accurate to me. Committee, did we miss anything? Okay, seeing none, tomorrow we will pick up at 8:30. You can sleep in a little bit and we'll be back in this room. My understanding is if you wanted to leave some of your items here, that the room will be locked. So it should be secure. You don't need to carry your notebooks or computer around if you don't want to.
And Madam Chairman,
Madam Co-Chair?
what about too, if we're the Horse Palace, if people were interested in seeing some of the parimutuel or the historic horse racing machines? too,
Yes.
that-
So Madam Co-Chair and I, we have arranged for you to have some people to visit about the skill games, but I did not reach out to the operator of a couple of the establishments that have historic horse racing machines. There are two that come to mind. There's one on Del Range, which is solely, that's its function is to offer historic horse racing machines. It's kind of by Target, in between Target and Hobby Lobby's big parking lots. The other place is the Outlaw Saloon. I know they've got some historic horse racing machines, so you can kind of get a feel for places that are destinations themselves for those kind of players that want to play versus, the Outlaw Saloon, where it's among several other activities, pools, darts, dancing, catching up with friends over a drink. So I'm happy to go to any of those places this evening if you really want me to. I'm a mom, I have 3 kids. This is gonna be a big night for me. So those are all options, but certainly there are other places in town that offer those types of entertainment as well.
Madam Chairman, was there also an invite from a horse? Oh, that's tomorrow.
Oh, right. Yes, I did. Yeah, Madam Chairman, yes, we did forward you an invitation if anybody is so inclined to visit one of the horse breeding farms or stations, and there's one just north of Cheyenne. And I forwarded you that invitation, and you can certainly visit some more with Judy Horton or the lady that owns the facility. If somebody would like to stop by, she's more than happy to show you some of her stallions. And I would suggest it because it does give you an opportunity to really see where those dollars are being spent.
Anything else, Representative Newsom?
Speaking of that, I had the opportunity to go to a horse massage clinic at the Golden Equine Farms. Beautiful place, really motivated people. And I was pleased that when the first day we were sitting there having lunch and visiting with the owner there, and she, without any prompting from anyone, said how important the historic horse racing money was to them and to their operation. She didn't know who I was from anybody. And so it was unsolicited confirmation that that program's working for horse farms in Wyoming.
Terrific. Any other comments for the good of the order? Anyone? All right, with that, meeting's adjourned for the day. Thank you, committee members.